One. Is this live? We're good. We're good. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting. Could we stand for Pledge of Allegiance, please? Roll call, please.
Mayor Labriola?
Here.
Mr. Moffett?
Here.
Mr. Bell?
Here.
Mr. Brenner?
Here.
Mr. Higginfelder?
Yep.
Ms. Johnson? Mr. Wilson?
We have two sets of minutes. The minutes from the Town Council workshop on February 7th. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved, please. Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Minutes of the Town Council meeting of February the 7th. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All
Very
in
good.
favor?
Aye. Aye.
Good. We have a number of guests, a number of special presentations, but Mary Ann came back to see us this afternoon, so we should recognize the fact that it must be a good meeting for her to come back. To leave the comforts of Seabrook. I have one report. On Friday, John and I met with Sheriff Graziano, and she, quite frankly, handed me a letter terminating the contract that we, the town, had with the county. The contract was for day shift deputies, 2 day shift deputies specifically, that were assigned to Kiowa. The off-shift contract continues to be in place, so it is no change to that. This contract had been in place for 4 years. It will terminate, she handled it effective March 1, so it'll actually terminate. It was a 90-day period, June the 1st. In her explanation, the sheriff felt that she needed to reallocate her resources and establish what she called a different grouping of municipalities to include Kiowa, Seabrook, all the way to Edenville. So that was her reasoning behind it. She felt that there would not be a diminution of service. All the equipment that the town had purchased, 4 vehicles and the like, will be returned. This contract started at a time when we as a community had concerns relative to security. 4 years ago, many years that preceded that. And we finally got to the point of having the contract with the Sheriff's Department. None of that has changed. We have the continued concerns relative to safety and security. So even though I heard what the sheriff said, I was very disappointed. This really caught us by surprise. So with that, we had talked about at the planning retreat to do an evaluation, to bring in a consultant to begin the evaluation of our own police force, our own municipal security. So like most things in life, that has now accelerated. So now, where we talked about it as terms of a planning objective, we are going to begin to do that very much now in earnest. Craig has had discussions with other types of services. I guess I wasn't aware, but there's a police force at the airport, as an example. So we will enter into discussions and talk with them about the possibility for something in the interim, something to do. And tomorrow, Stephanie and I and John are going to go out and meet with Jenny Honeycutt. I want the councilwoman to understand our concern, what happened, the way it happened, and that we're moving on. So I think it was just important that county council realize this also in terms of entities that they have contracts with. So I just want to mention that to you as we learn more, do more. I will keep everybody apprised. I want to take the sheriff's to her word that there will be no diminution in services, but like I said, we will just have to carefully monitor that, but we will be underway. Okay, that's my report. John?
Nothing that we're not going to discuss in another forum later, so I'll pass for now.
Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple things I wanted to raise, one of which is somewhat related to the matter you just addressed. I don't recall the specific date, but a few weeks ago we had what was characterized as a critical incident on the island. And I'm not sure if the community writ large is aware of this, but there was a woman who parked a car at the KIRE parking lot, was wandering around, appeared to be under some mental distress, but then claimed that there was a bomb in her car, under her car. The sheriff's office was called and responded to that. Fortunately, it turned out to be essentially a non-event, but for a period of time, there was uncertainty about that. The folks in the KIRE office were told to shelter in place, at least that's my understanding. Riverview, which is immediately adjacent, wasn't notified. And unfortunately, the council didn't find out about it until the next day. And part of this, I think, relates to the communication or lack thereof, unfortunately, with the sheriff's office. It's probably a unfortunate thing, but in some respects may be a good thing that we're moving in a different direction, Mayor, as you suggested. But it also raises the issue of how we communicate internally and externally regarding similar types of critical incidents in the future, and particularly given the fact that I assume Charleston County is still going to have a role with regard to responding to these types of incidents, and we've got to figure out a way forward to be informed ourselves in a timely manner about these issues, but also how we best communicate things with the rest of the community. And there appears to be a little bit of disconnect between the Toki and Kika on that right now that probably needs some conversation as well. But my concern is that, this could have been very different. It could have been a real incident, and we've got to have a better ability to interact efficiently and effectively amongst all the first responders, as well as to make sure that the community is fully apprised of these issues. And I know there's some efforts ongoing in that regard, but hopefully we can resolve these issues, because it's just too important. One other issue I wanted to raise right now, just to kind of put it on everybody's radar screen, because I know not all of my fellow council members participate in the entertainment that is IKEA. But if you don't, there were probably 50 emails or more this past week or so regarding e-bikes. And it's an issue that's come kind of back to the surface. Stephanie, I don't know when the last time it was that the town has looked at this issue, but there appears to be an interest on part of some in the community about revisiting e-bikes. I didn't add up those in favor and those opposed. It seemed to be somewhat equivalent. But it seems like there are at least issues that we should periodically take a look at. Obviously, Kika could set its own rules with regard to what's applicable behind the gate on Kika roads or Kika the bike path and pathways, but that doesn't address outside the gate, which is to and from Freshfields and down Beachwalker Drive into Beachwalker Park. So I don't know, when was the last time we looked at this, and have you been apprised?
I'm trying to go off memory. So yes, I've been following the conversation at IKEA. The Public Safety Committee looked at this, I want to say, you guys looked at it last year, and I also want to say that when I was really active, we probably, through the Public Safety Committee, looked at it probably about 2 or 3 times, and I believe it was going to be on their agenda again this month or next month? This month. So we are looking at it. I know before, when I originally was on public safety, when we looked at it, the reason why we, at the time, did not look at adding or allowing it was just because of KICA regulations. And if I recall before, it was, well, if someone was to buy it, essentially they would have to stop using the e-bike portion of it once they hit the gate. And I know, and maybe Mr. David DeStefano during his comment period, because I know they have a committee as well that has talked about this and looked at it. So I don't want to speak for you all because I'm not sure what you're doing. But I think that, but we did as a town, we looked at it for our portion of the right-of-way. I also want to say on the beach, I don't believe that it's permissible on the beach right now, but that's something that, again, this public safety committee can look at.
Would that, from.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's
Toki
not.
prohibits or KICA prohibits?
Where, on the beach?
Yeah,
The town.
The town.
Yeah, Toki.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I mean.
That'd be something that this public safety committee can additionally look at, but then again, I think they can look at it, and then at some point, they can bring it forth to council, and council can have a discussion to say if the town would decide to allow it, but then it wouldn't still be allowed behind the gate, or if KICA decides to make a change, then but yeah, but it's on the agenda for discussion.
Okay.
For public
And-
safety.
and just,
So Russell will be, as a liaison to Public Safety Committee, he
Yes.
would be heavily involved with that from a council standpoint.
Thank you.
What's up? Michael?
Thank you. Nothing to add because we are having a long agenda, so all the topics are going to be addressed.
Thank you. Russ?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of things. Just to follow up, in the last month, I received an email from a Mr. Todd Boney, B-O-N-E-Y, and he had a simple request that I wanted to throw out to the panel. He asked that the town council periodically publish the remaining number of units to be constructed or be developed. I'm just throwing that out there. He made that request. I'm not sure how to respond to that or if we should, but I just wanted to put that out in the record, so he's looking for a response to that.
And Russ, I'd actually, Todd and I, just who's in the room with us, I just chatted about this. I'd actually sent a similar type of informational request to Stephanie and John, coming out of somewhat of a discussion at the Johns Island Task Force, where, I think staff is pulling that together at a high level. Where I think we're at is, and again, this is just kind of rough numbers. There are somewhat more than 5,000 current occupied dwelling units or dwelling units which have certificates of occupancy on the island, and roughly it appears that there's a potential for another 20% increase above that. I think, Stephanie, you said there are 400 or 500 undeveloped lots, and then there are dozens, if not hundreds, of current building permits, new construction building permits, and that doesn't include, obviously, potential development of upper and lower beach walkers, plus all the entitlements that KIGR has under their development agreement, both with respect to the parcel across from Cougar Point as well as East Beach Village.
All right, so it looks like something is in the works. All right. I also wanted to follow up on an email, and I should have talked to you, Councilman Heidingsfelder, but so I'm doing it now. You sent me an email in February, and you just asked for some worker safety data, and you were curious, rightfully so, if there are any statistics with respect to accidents and such for our construction folk on the island and such. So I met and discussed this with, our safety director, Mr. Harris, and he said, unfortunately, the EMS data is not broken down that way. It's not broken down to guest workers, construction workers, et cetera. So we don't have the ability to find out how many of the accidents would be related to things in our jurisdiction. Just wanted to follow up with you on that. Also, with respect to my liaison issues, or I should say responsibility for safety, I met with Shannon White the last week or so to discuss safety things that were a concern to me, and I noticed that there's still some safety concerns for for Surf Song, and she indicated there's a plan in the works to address that, so I don't know what that is yet, but there's something going on, and I'm glad to hear that. While we were there, Mr. Tony Elder came in, and the topic, Brad, that you were discussing about the event on the island, he indicated to me, and I didn't plan on discussing this, it just kind of happened when he walked into the room, and I wanted to share this with everybody. He indicated that there is a system out there called the Integrated Public Alert Warning System. It's called IPAWS, I-P-A-W-S. And what this does, it's the way I understand it, it's similar to what an Amber Alert system would do, where if you're geographically located within a certain fence boundary from cell phones, that you get a message. And Mr. Elder said he knows someone, I think in Mount Pleasant, I didn't write that down, but he's familiar with the IPAWS system, so he offered that he was going to follow up and see what that system is about and how we can get it for ourselves. With respect to the Johns Island Task Force, I go to that meeting every week, and the only big thing I wanted to leave with the community, it was one of my takeaways. There was a big presentation with respect to individuals moving in and out of the Charleston County. There is a exodus of lower income, and when I say lower income, I don't mean people on subsidies. I'm referring to, I should say, the worker group. Those homes are, those individuals in those homes are leaving, which is a concern for the worker population. In addition, the majority, there was a slide, the vast majority of new homes being constructed are for those in $150,000 per year salary and up. It's not even close to the amount of people, or housing, I should say, for the worker class. So that's an item of concern, but there were some goals that were presented at the task force, and this is the purpose of attending the task force. It's a wonderful organization that takes into consideration all the infrastructure and housing needs on the island. So they have certain goals out there in order to try to attract housing for the working class. They're looking at cultivating relationships with major employers to get them to invest in housing. And they're looking at to have ordinances redefined such that permitting for housing, particularly the non-upper end housing, can be achieved more quickly than normal. And this will give the incentive to developers to turn the properties over faster and make a buck faster. And they're also looking at establishing financing for the production of affordable housing on Johns Island. So I wanted to let you guys know about that's going on, because that's a concern to the community here, particularly as the island continues to get built out up and down Betsy Carrison. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Chris. Stephanie?
I'll limit my comments to some of the things that I think will be discussed under old business, but I just want to let council know, in case you wanted any additional information, is that I know there's been some, you guys have received emails, so have I, in regards to the Mingo Curve. And we put gravel there, and trucks or cars run off the road. They kick the gravel back into the road. John and our traffic engineer, Dylan, today went out to take a look at it, so we are trying to come up with some more permanent solutions to the Mingo Curve. So that currently is in discussion. As soon as we have some additional information, of course, we'll share it with you all. But I just wanted to let you know that it is on our radar. We are trying to figure out a long-term solution to fix that.
Thanks. Stephanie, in this context, I do know that occasionally we have a street sweeper, I think, on the island. Maybe that's something that Kika organizes or something. Maybe we can look at a way to periodically, until we have a permanent solution, to at least clean the street from the gravel, because that's actually the biggest concern, that a car is throwing off, stones either towards pedestrians and bikers or windshields of cars coming the other way.
Yes, I'll talk with Brian on that. We've had a street sweeper come before work at night, but we can look into having them come more often. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Stephanie, if I could come back to one issue. Russ raised it again, and I'd mentioned the critical incident. And I just pulled up an email, Russ's mention of Shannon and Tony, Shannon White, Tony Elder, refresh my recollection, because I had asked a question about it at the time, and what she indicated, she and Tony sent me an email saying, we, KICA, have an understanding with the town that they take the lead in communications related to public safety situations. Is that your understanding, that the town first communicates?
Yeah, what I think she's referring to, because really typically the only time we really activate that is during hurricane evacuation orders or any information coming out related to hurricanes, so the town takes the lead on that. And if there's something, I think in this particular incident,
if there were an active shooter situation,
then we would take the lead in terms of, we would work with them in terms of what we want to communicate. So both communication teams essentially sit down together and figure out what communication we're going to push out. The town pushes it out first, and they go through our code red, and then KICA picks up the information, and they push it out through their
that presumes
channels.
we have to know about
That's correct.
the
Yeah.
critical incident.
That's correct.
So, Brett, in that context, are we, because now you're saying that, you know, people talking to each other in an incident like this, and often there is no time for this. I mean, have we played through an incident like an active shooter or a bomb threat or something else so that we could basically, you know, pull something from a drawer as a communication,
The town-
alter it quickly, and be just faster in communicating to the community?
So actually, Mr. Harris, our public safety director, has put together this Friday an active shooter seminar or
I remember.
tabletop for staff. But I think after this conversation, we will sit down with Shannon.
Because time is
and
of
put
essence.
together a-
Right, because
Yes,
time is of essence, so we
those
need to be
incidents,
fast.
yeah, for something like that, we'll have something that we make sure that we are able to talk with the community association in a timely manner.
But so, don't want to really dwell on this, but it's ultimately as important as anything we will ever have to deal with. Hopefully, we never have to deal with it, but if we do, how we respond to it is critically important. I mean, is it the case that something like that, the Charleston County Sheriff's Office would be the primary first responder, be taking the lead? And if we have issues with communication with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office, as appears to be the case, what is the answer? How do we fill that gap?
Well, right now, give us some time to take a look at it, so we're not trying to solve it today, right now. So what we'll do is we'll come back to council with some recommendations. But one of the things I think that if Mr. Elder talked about IPAWS, well, Mr. Harris worked for Mount Pleasant Police Department, so we can talk with him about it. I think our Public Safety Committee, I think this is all a great conversation that I would push back to the Public Safety Committee so they can come back. How about they come back next month at the April meeting with some kind of preliminary discussion in terms of the things that was just discussed today, if that's all right.
That makes
Then
sense.
also in this context, so after that recent incident that Brad was referring to, have we done a thorough analysis of what happened, where the breakdown happened, and in terms of communication, both from somebody to us and then from us to the community, and what measures we need to take to do a better job next time?
We can have that discussion at Public Safety Committee has not
Okay,
happened.
good. I would recommend that discussion takes place and that Greg, you know, gives a detailed timeline of what happened, so that a real, you know, analysis of the breakdown of communication can be identified.
Very good. Citizen comments.
Good afternoon, Maura McIlvaine, 146 Blue Heron Pond Road. I came to talk about two things that I addressed at the latest Ways and Means Committee. One, I assume has been fixed. One relates to the auditor's contract. And at the Ways and Means, I pointed out that the ordinance of the town requires that that contract be negotiated by the mayor and cannot be delegated to anyone else. So because it's up, I assume, up at this meeting, I assume that that has been done, which I appreciate, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. The second reason I rise is to talk about the $75,000 contribution to the Conservancy. At the Ways and Means Committee, I asked what I thought was a simple question, which is, the property's off island. Are there criteria? What does the council look at to go off island? Are there no on-island contributions, things that can be purchased? And the first response I got was, well, we make contributions to a lot of off-island entities like Backpack Buddies and the food pantry. And that caused me to do some research. Backpack Buddies last year got $5,000. The food bank got $10,000. And those both were in harmony with the objective announced by council that they were going to fund hunger, housing, and health programs. So those make sense. The largest contribution last year was $30,000 to Our Lady of Mercy Community Outreach Services. It was not $75,000. It was not to purchase property. And it was not to purchase property with an entity that announced at the Ways and Means Committee it has the money to buy the property without the $75,000. So I rise again to say, I don't believe this contribution is consistent with what this council has said is appropriate for its charitable contributions. Thank you.
More, I appreciate that. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
I think you raised some good points. I would perhaps, in my own mind, distinguish between the dollar amount, given that this one would have some permanency attached to it. You're talking about putting land near Kiowa Island, the gateway to Kiowa Island, under permanent conservation easement. The other contributions are something that are more akin to a potential annual support, operating support. So I might personally distinguish them that way. If your question is with regard to whether the Conservancy should better expend its money on island or not, or off island, I believe the town has previously supported on island projects. I'm not sure why we would necessarily want to limit ourselves to on island projects. That's just my own personal view. With respect to the fact that the Conservancy said they could support it themselves, even if they didn't receive either town's funding support or the Greenbelt dollars. I think that's a point well taken. I guess the one way to look at that is if the council believes and the community believes that this is something for the benefit of the broader community, then doing something along these lines certainly leverages or expands their ability to do similar types of projects in the future. And it's my understanding from the Conservancy, but I know Lee Bundrick and others are here, correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the scoring criteria to receive Greenbelt Initiative funds, which are from Charleston County, was support of other organizations and or municipalities. So again, it's kind of from a finance concept, leverage. You can expand dollars further if you're able to do it this way rather than the Conservancy doing it itself. But I think those are fair questions. Just one member, council member's perspective is I kind of resolved in my own mind the benefits relative to those questions as I've tried to outline.
Any other citizen comments? Yes, ma'am.
Mary Ann Conley, Seabrook Island. I just want to comment on the housing issue that Russell brought up. Right now, the county has issued a huge housing plan. It's some 150 pages that is being analyzed by all of the organizations that might benefit from low to moderate income housing. I happen to be the chair of the board for Habitat for Humanity. One of the things that everyone should know is that the county is sitting on $20 million. Russell, when you said they want to raise money for housing, they have $20 million that they've had for 3 or 4 years that should be spent on housing that they're just holding on to. I wanted to make that comment, and if anyone's interested in the housing plan, you just go onto the county website and you can see it. Thank you.
So you never truly retire, huh? Never yes, sir. Yes, please. Oh.
Paul Hennessy, 12 Blue Heron Pond Road. So relative to the inquiry that Todd Boney made, I assume development will be issue number 1 in the comprehensive plan that is now being developed. So, I mean, it's not just the number of, doors and undeveloped units, but the total scope of future development, I hope, and I would expect would be part of the comprehensive plan that's underway. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Alex Fernandez, 418 Snowy Egret. I'd like to comment, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, on item G on your new business agenda. Discuss all possible options to improve and enhance vehicular and pedestrian circulation at the main gate. This is an item that it's been on the agenda on several occasions. It's been discussed for the last several years. I just want to comment that the situation at the front gate is not becoming any better, even though your budget projections showed that or projected that you were going to have a 20% decrease in tourist tax income or revenue. That's not happening. My point is we still have over 200,000 vehicles every month through that front gate. And I would ask that you put this item on a fast track, sense of urgency type of item. We can't continue to talk about it. We need to do something about it. We've had some minor accidents, some more serious than others. We've got backups, daily now. I don't know if you saw today, but today there was a very long line at any time of the day. So I would please ask the council to discuss this, but put it on a fast track, on a sense of urgency issue. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And just, Alex, I would just note that that ties in really with what Paul just raised is, growth is, we've got to understand what the implications of growth. That's the situation now. If we are indeed facing a 20% increase in the number of dwelling units on the island or something around that, many of those which may be rental properties, then we're going to have that much more traffic, in the near term, not too far, many years in the future, and that's going to put greater stress not only in the front gate but all our infrastructure, amenities, roads, and everything else, and that's got to be part of our comprehensive plan.
My point is fast track, sense of urgency.
I'm talking on the same topic. I agree with Alex
Name
on
and address,
fast
please.
tracking. Dave DiStefano, 31 Burroughs Hall. The design and talking about this intersection and modifications of the intersection been going on for years. Even when I was on the Public Works Committee, we were talking about this. One of the things I want to bring up, there's been initial discussions that we learned through the town with the partners about acquiring the real estate office for a welcome type center. you have to choose one or the other right now, because if that's going to be used for some type of welcome center, that affects the design of that intersection because of all the traffic that's going to be having to go through there. So if you're going to go forward with the intersection, you're pretty much going to drop the plans for acquiring that building, because it's two completely different animals with or without that building.
Dave, if I might, I mean, and I guess I could have posed this question to Alex as well. This isn't an issue that the town can look at unilaterally. I mean, this is driven by KICA as much as anything else. KICA controls access to the island. KICA has the pass office there. What is KICA fast tracking? Looking at a full range of alternatives, how to address ingress and egress beyond the first gate, and what that looks like.
Well, we continually address that issue, but we don't know what to address until the town decides if they're going to go forward with the improvements.
So I think when we get to this point on the agenda, we'll probably talk about all these things.
Option number 11, I think, was the most popular option.
And it's probably good to wait for that, because we're going to talk about all these different options. And I think Dave's point is valid. It depends on what happens to that building and that
Yes.
property, so.
Any other comments? I would like to make a suggestion. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do this. Items A, B, and C under new business. We have three distinguished gentlemen here to make updates. Does anybody really mind if we pause on old business A and B so that we can let these guys make their presentations and get back to, I mean, is this?
They would just have to formally have council to amend the agenda.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we amend the agenda to let what I just said? Does anybody have any problem with that?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Colley is here with us. And
All in
I just
favor?
so appreciate.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now they'll say no. We so appreciate you coming here. This has been an issue that we're all anxious about and concerned about. And but thank you very much for taking time to do this.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council for adjusting your agenda. I really appreciate it. I won't take all of your time, but there have been questions raised since we ground broke at the Medical Pavilion and Emergency Department right there on Seabrook Island Road off to the right as you're going down. There hasn't been a lot of action since then. So I'm here just to give you an update on what has occurred. So there has not been any action because we've run into an issue, and this is public knowledge. We've run into an issue with our neighbor right there, who is not at this time allowing us to have an egress onto Andell Bluff Road. Why that's important, that's a long, narrow piece of property, and it requires an ingress and a separate egress. All right, the ingress would be coming off of Seabrook Island Road, and the egress would go on to Andell Bluff. That egress was mainly for emergency vehicles. So the ingress and egress on Seabrook Island would be for cars, but we have not gotten permission from the owner of the property right next door. As we dug into it, I think we thought that permission was coming relatively quickly, and that was not the case. And we became concerned that this might drag on for some period of time. So we at MUSC are anxious. We feel the community's need for this service, and we want to move forward. We started looking at other property. Frankly, we just wanted to have our options. We didn't want to get to the end of our current property and potentially not have an egress at all, and therefore we wouldn't be able to develop that property. So we have looked for, we spent part of November and part of December looking for new property, still inside the circle. And we have identified property, and we're going through, we actually sized it. We feel pretty good about the sizing, and we're going through due diligence at this time. We need 90 days to do due diligence. That 90-day period started right at the end of January. And so far, the due diligence is going fine. It's not all done yet, but we feel confident that in the future, we'll be on either the new property or the old property. Whatever it turns out is the easiest and the fastest for us to go forward. So we'll have these two properties. We're working with Kiowa Partners on this. as well, and that is where we are. That's a sort of a synopsis. I think this could delay us, potentially 9 to 12 months if we end up going to the new property, but we'll just have to deal with that at this time. We are fully committed to this service. The need is still there. The need hasn't gone away. This has just required us to pivot. So I wanted the council and the mayor to be aware, wanted the public to be aware, and I'm happy to take any questions on that at this point in time.
Sure. Pat, we talked about the functionality of the building is not changed?
No, the functionality will not change. Remember, it's two buildings, or it's two services in one building. One is a emergency department, a 24/7, 7-day-a-week operation, and then the other one is what's called a medical office building, a place where you would go see a doctor, you can get lab work done, imaging tests done, physical therapy, those kind of things. Nothing changes.
Council, anybody?
Well, given that you said that you're working with Kia Partners on that, then I guess we would have to assume that the alternative property would be within the town of Kiowa Island.
Yes, the property is within the town of Kiowa.
And you have, and there would be not the similar types of ingress and egress issues, I guess, presented there. At least that's what you're doing, you're diligencing on, amongst other things.
Correct. We're working through all that. We even have to work through the helicopter flight path and things like that. So we're working through all that right now. I don't anticipate an ingress-egress problem, though.
Would the building footprint change, or building structures kind of notionally or originally planned have to change?
What we're looking at initially here is it probably is going to change. The property we're looking at a little more square. That current property is long and narrow. It's going to be a long, narrow building. It may facilitate more of a square type building.
Okay. Pat, thanks for coming and updating us, and especially the community, about this very important project. I think a lessons learned from the time until we are here today, means we need to improve communication about the further progress. And as I said, I really appreciate that you're here and giving this, but I also hope that from now onwards, over the next couple of weeks and months, because they seem to be very crucial for the entire project, that you also please come forward with, a regular update to the community, that we know where you stand with this, because I know a lot of people on the islands are really eager to see this project starting.
Yes, we're committed to transparency on this. We understand the want and the need for this, and want to move forward, and don't need it to be in secret. So we'll be sure to come back at another time and provide additional updates as necessary.
Yeah, or just provide us with updates, and we put it into our newsletter so that we keep the community informed.
And Stephanie, there aren't any issues with the I'm not sure, would this be within the Freshfields PUD, and I assume there would be no issues with regard to this type of facility?
We're currently looking at that in terms of the use, and I've already communicated that to Mr. Cawley.
That's another issue. We're aware of something that we'll have to tackle at the right time.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members, council.
Thank you very much.
Another distinguished guest is Chris Carrata. Chris is the principal of Riverstone and calls this place a second home. He's been here so many times.
Lately.
And we thank him for being here and giving us an update. This is the Andal project, the property adjacent to Freshfields. So I think everybody hopefully is familiar with that. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It's good to be here. As you said, I have been here quite a lot lately, but it's all been for the best. We've been making a lot of progress, as you all know. I've been meeting with you, with all the other various stakeholders, Toki, Preserve Kiowa, Cacique, Kiowa Conservancy, really hitting all of the groups, and as well as working closely with Charleston County. We had some meetings yesterday with Charleston County as well, which was also part of this trip, which went very well. So so just to kind of give the community an update, the main, we had several issues as we were going through the process that came up through all of these various groups, and what that's resulted in is a new plan that we are in the process of finalizing now that really addresses, I think, every issue that came up. And I'll go through some of those and kind of explain, how we're addressing those. We hope to have that plan finished very soon. We can release it to the community. When we do that, we'll explain how it all works. The other group, obviously, we're working with is Edens, who is the new owner of Freshfields. So that kind of, when they purchased Freshfields, that threw a little bit of a wrinkle in that we had a new owner to get to know and work things out with. So, and that primary thing is integration. So as we went through the process, the biggest thing that came up was wanting this project to feel like a natural extension of Freshfields and to have proper integration, both pedestrian and vehicular integration with Freshfields. And in order to do that, we had to move the Harris Teeter building on the plan further back into the site so that it better aligns with Freshfields Village, with the two main roads that go through adjacent to the current Harris Teeter and through the middle of the site, so that we have a lot better flow for pedestrians and vehicles. We believe we've done that and have a great plan, and in working with all the key stakeholders, we feel that they feel the same way. The other issues, architectural harmony is something that we've been committed to from the beginning. It gets asked a lot, and I think, Riverstone has proven its commitment to great architecture throughout the island, and that's not something we plan on changing anytime soon. In moving the building, moving the Harris Teeter building back, what that's actually allowed us to do is some really cool things within the site, and one of those is incorporating a village green and restaurant row that would sort of ring that village green to create an internal park of, we hear from residents all the time about the different types of restaurants, the need for restaurants, and in working with, the restaurant community, we know there's demand for restaurateurs to come here. So I think we've got a great opportunity to do that, and that would be incorporated into the plan. Buffering is something that we've talked about all along. We're committed to continuing the 100-foot buffer along Keogh Island Parkway that Freshfields has currently. In addition, another 100-foot buffer to the south of the property that would further buffer Cacique and kind of ring the property. Essentially, you've got this, our property in a ring of usable green space. And usable green space is sort of critical. I mean, there's, as I've heard you talk about today, pedestrians, bicyclists, all of these things. We need to move those, those travelers efficiently into the site and make it a very pleasant experience to do so. The other big buffer question that's come up was related to the fuels, the fuel center, which is an integral part of the Harris Teeter. We've agreed to buffer that to limited size to a very small center with just a kiosk for payments, no buildings, and buffer that from all roads so that you would not even know it was there. Permitted uses, we've gone through our list of permitted uses and pared that down to just the essentials that I think everybody agrees that we want. And finally, traffic. We've been working closely with Stephanie and the town's traffic engineer to study all of this and make sure it works with the traffic circle that the town desires at this location, and we're also committed to do that. So really, that's kind of the main summary. We're excited to get going. We're excited to reintroduce this plan. We view this as kind of the end of a process that a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders have had their hands in, and frankly, it's resulted in something that's much better than we started with, and we appreciate everyone's work on that. And, like I said, I'll have something to really release soon, but I'm open to questions if council has any.
Well, Chris, I just thank you really for coming here and just to listen. I think that the list that you identified, oh my, that goes back a long ways in terms of some of the real material points that the community had highlighted over these past many months. And a group of us, I'm not sure who now, but a group of us have seen Plan B, and they've all been addressed. And Peter Schneider, credit to Peter from CASIC, the HOA, for working with you, and I applaud all the efforts that you have.
He did. He took the lead on really organizing all the groups, and that was extremely helpful.
And I wanted Chris to come so that he can hear from all of us the support that we have for this project. I'm not sure if this is out of line. I would really like to see this come into the town. I would really like to see the town help you get this project going. I certainly understand the uniqueness that you have right now in terms of this being part of the county's planning, and respect decisions you and your principals have to make relative to all of that, but that's just your local fellow giving you his 2 cents. So I think you've done a marvelous job, and it's going to happen. I want it to happen, and I really would like to see it happen here at Kiowa. But others, please.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, Chris, also from my side, I mean, you were kind enough sharing your Plan B, I think is the working title at the moment, with us in various individual sessions. And I really have to say, and as you know, I had also a long list of topics that I disliked with Plan A.
Yes, I recall.
Very similar to many of us. And we communicated that to Councilwoman Honeycutt, and in various forms and shapes, and media. But I was really blown away by the effort that you and your team have put in here, in conjunction with all the people that you mentioned that have helped so lot to make this work. But I really tried. I could not find a single topic remaining on my list. I had to cross them all off. I think it is a fantastic plan. I believe that it gives us the chance that what we are currently still calling Endel West, and at some point we'll find a common name for it, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Is really something that gives us a feel as if it was there from the very beginning. It is well connected for both traffic as well as pedestrians and bikes. It provides so many amenities that are in need for the community, I believe. The placing of the Harris Teeter has substantially improved. The way that you're kind of, also designing around the pharmacy pickup, I think has been so much better. And the various areas where you're introducing, green space that is usable for the community is incredible. So I'm very, very supportive of what I saw. I think and do strongly believe the community will do the same. It's a fantastic plan. And as John said, I think if we as a town can now help you to be faster in implementing this project, I'm sure we will do whatever it takes, because there is the need in the community for this becoming real over the years. But again, thank you very much for
thank you so much
for your hard work. Also to your team, I think that was very well worth for the community. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Others?
I want to echo the mayor's and Michael's comments, and maybe even go a little bit further, Chris. I think it's no secret that I was a very vocal critic of the original annexation proposal, going back a couple of years now, both substantively and more so at the time procedurally. Also a critic of the original PD application for community commercial designation, but that's not where we're at now. And maybe it was a little bit, you were pulled kicking and screaming, but however we got to the point that we got to, I want to, once there was kind of the shift, and it was post the vote of disapproval from Charleston Planning Commission, I mean, I think it provided an opportunity for you and many leaders in the community to sit down around the table together and really try to hash things out. And I want to commend, I've been in, a couple of those meetings, but I know many of the folks have been more directly engaged. The spirit of engagement and cooperation on your part and the Riverstone team, I think, is to be commended. Everybody, it's a process of give and take. The Plan B that everybody's been talking about, I think while nobody may be ever happy with everything that's in it, represents a true citizen-centric effort and engagement that resulted in compromises, which, to your point, I think is better. I think you agree is better than where you started. I think it's a plan around which the community can coalesce. I'm pleased as well to offer my full-throated support for where we've landed, both in terms of its substance and the process by how we got there. And I hope this can characterize how we deal with these types of projects going forward as well.
Yeah, I think we all learned a lot. And
John, Russ, anything to add?
So I would only say that whenever this is finished, I think what we'll end up with is yet another Riverstone Group project that is magnificent for Kiowa. Everything you guys have done so far has turned out to be beautiful, and I think this will be too.
yes, we promise it will be.
Thank you,
All
Chris.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Stephanie, I don't know Mr. Kramer, so is he here? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Hi. We're putting up his presentation. Mr. Kramer is, and welcome, sir, Executive Director of the Charleston County Board of Elections and Voter Registration, and has some hot off the press
Thank you.
issues that we wanted everybody to be aware of.
Well, good afternoon. Those that know me, I'm Isaac, the Director of Elections in Charleston County. So I want to talk this afternoon about some of the things we have been planning and looking at going forward. It ties into obviously what's on your agenda item. But as election administrators, our job doesn't start 2 days before the election. We're always looking at opportunities to be good planners and good stewards of not only taxpayer funds, but knowing that we have a huge responsibility to have safe and secure elections. So we've identified one way to mitigate risk and increase efficiency in the election process. And as you know, your elections are in even years in December, following a gubernatorial election and a presidential election. So this afternoon, I just kind of will lay out some of the solutions that we can come to, and I believe our office, this is a top priority for us, and not just here in Charleston County, but this is something going through the whole state. It's to unify election dates for not just municipalities, but countywide elections. So I just want to, I think it's on your screen, right? Yes. Or if you look here, the beginning of the year, we're always preparing for the upcoming year and the following year to look at the procedures, the things we have in place. And this is just to illustrate all the work we do prior to an election. And I want to hone in on an important theme, which is competing timelines. This is for next year, for 2024. The entire year we are devoted to securing the election for the presidential election, as well as the town of Kiowa. And it's interesting that I'm talking to you today because you guys were addressing security as a big concern. That is the number one concern that I have as an election official, is not just the security of our voters, but it's our poll workers and of the locations. So what happens in our competing timelines is we're securing polling locations across the county for Election Day on November 8th or 9th or 7th. But then we also have the Kiowa election that we also hold to the highest esteem that we're going to perform the best that we do for that election. It's not an other than election. It's just important as a presidential election. That's important to distinguish. It doesn't matter if we have a special election, a municipal election, or countywide election. We treat them all the same. The preparation and hard work that our office does is critical to that success. So I'm highlighting the 60-day mark because this is where we have a competing timeline. The 60-day to 45 and 30 days before an election is right when we have the competing timeline with Kiowa and getting prepared for everything that goes into preparing for that election. Getting all the equipment set up, testing that equipment, making sure that the ballots are approved, while also juggling the responsibilities of serving 300,000 registered voters in the whole county, hiring thousands of poll workers and early voting workers and absentee voting. That is all kind of colliding at the same moment in time in October of an even year. So as we go through it, this is what most people see, is election day. They see all the things that are happening in voting and elections, but what they don't see is this last part, which is a post-election. So right when the election ends, we have a week, and I'll show you the calendar. There's a week in between before early voting starts on Kiowa Island and what we have to do. And we have audits, hand count audits to perform. We have recounts to perform, payroll for the thousands of poll workers. All the inboxing and everything we have to do to close out an election is happening on a very express timeline while we're also preparing for the town of Kiowa election, which, like I want to say, we do your elections. By ordinance, we do your elections. And as the representative of the office that performs that, I think it's really key that we kind of go over some of that. Now, costs, I'm just showing you just right here. There's costs, but it's not just monetary, it's resource costs. All our staff are devoted to thousands of folks, hundreds of thousands of people that are voting for that November election. We have early voting that, if you all remember, a gubernatorial election, we had it right here on Johns Island, which a lot of your residents took advantage of. The resources that we set aside for a presidential election is enormous, and a gubernatorial election. It's not just we just set something up and it happens. We put a lot of work into it. So those resources kind of come to collide around that October 21st when early voting starts for that presidential election. And then you see November 18th is when your early voting starts. But you should also point out on that calendar is the 2 days, the 28th and 29th, that's Thanksgiving and Black Friday. Your voters have 2 less days of early voting because of the December election date. Also causes confusion with absentee ballots. I'm going to show that right there. That's the applications for an absentee ballot for the November election and the Kiowa election. They look the same. They have a different title on them, but that's a state subscribed form. What we had happen, as you can see here, we have a lot of residents on the town of Kiowa. We saw this huge in 2020. It happened in 2022. Voters would only submit 1 application back to our office, and it was usually for the election. Like, for example, they would submit the Kiowa election back, and then it gets to a week before the election, and they say, why don't I have my ballot yet? Well, we never received the first application. We don't have that returned back, and then vice versa, the same happened. Folks who requested an absentee ballot for the town election in December didn't receive their ballot, and that caused some issues with the voters. That's a huge number. 11.6% of voters who requested an absentee ballot did not vote in the 2022 Kiowa municipal election. And those were applications that were mailed out for November and for December. And the voters get 2 applications in the envelope. They need to return both. When they call in, we tell them that. But that's a pretty huge number for residents here on the town of Kiowa. This was another issue, ballots that are returned. Because of the competing timelines, we have 2 ballots that go out generally at the same time. You have your presidential ballot or gubernatorial ballot, and you have your town ballot, which could have mayor or just town council on it. It depends on the year. And voters were returning the wrong ballot into the wrong envelope. We saw this in 2020, and we saw this in 2022. Now, the vote will not count because it's the incorrect election, but when we see that, it spotlighted an issue to us that, hey, we probably need to talk about this, start the conversation to see how we can maybe consolidate, coordinate an election schedule that would not compete with the presidential. I bring these two numbers to you because voter turnout is important. You want to represent the people on the island and you want them to vote. The Isle of Palms has their election in November of odd years. They had a 44% turnout rate, which is not really that high, but that's actually really high for a municipal election. And we find in the island communities, turnout is higher. But in Kiowa, in this past election, we only had 31% turnout. That's a significant difference in number. And one of the reasons is fatigue of...
I'm sorry. 11, I get the number, 11.6 people, 11.6 of the voting population, they applied to vote absentee, and because of reasons it didn't work. Did they vote? You don't know?
So no, they did not.
Wow.
So
is one reason that the Isle of Palms had such better turnout, so they just had a much better slate of candidates that people were interested in?
Well, so I will get, so hold on, so that you actually have a good point. So I want to, we're going to laugh because that is funny, but the truth is you are competing against a presidential or gubernatorial cycle. So when you are campaigning, this is not, okay, I'm going to put my citizen hat on. I don't live here, but here's my citizen hat, not the director of elections. When you are campaigning or thinking about running for office, you're competing with every single other office that is in the November election. So you start filing for office in August, those things go through in September, but you're going with president, U.S. Senate, congressional, county council, all the way to state house rep, state senator. Those are all going on at the same time. So yard signs are all over the place. And at that point, it's probably hard to even think about running for office because it's probably saying, hey, you know, when are the elections? And a lot of folks that move here to Kiowa, they're used to a November election cycle. And we see that with their turnout numbers to support that. So they just had a presidential election, and they probably think in the back of their mind, well, I already voted in November. What are we voting on today in December? So that's something, but it kind of feeds to your point.
Well, I guess my question, I guess it's an obvious one, I'm sure you have, can knock it out of the park, is if the primary goal is to increase turnout, why is the solution going to an odd year election rather just having town of Kiowa added to the ballot of when you're voting for Charleston County, you're voting for Senate, you're voting for Congress, and in every other cycle, voting for president?
It's a great question, and one of the things we find, which if you look at school board, which is at the end of the ballot, so you have your partisan offices at the front, and then on the second page is usually your referendum and school board, that turnout drops significantly for voting for those offices because there's so much on the ballot already. So that would not be advantageous to the town to have being at the bottom. Moving to November, you're it. You're the only show in town, and there's no voter fatigue from November election. There's none of that. And then we don't have the holiday of Thanksgiving. And quite frankly, as you know, a lot of people travel during the holidays, and that election is literally right after the Thanksgiving holiday.
Well, again, I'm trying to focus on not where we are now, but there seems like there are two alternatives, one which is going to odd year, and the other is, you know, just where we're all voting. We're used to voting on that first Tuesday in November, and we're used to voting for, right now, maybe president, state, federal, county, other issues. But what you're saying is simply adding the town to that is a bridge too far, and that's going to result in reduced turnout or reduced response relative to going to odd year.
Correct. And one thing is, as in your agenda item, there is a state house bill that will require odd year elections. So that if you move to an even year election, we'll be moving it again, most likely. This is just a statistic for you, and this is moving upward. Throughout the state, more and more municipalities are moving to odd year November. And it's something that, as my office, I really feel is our top priority going forward, is we want to increase voter turnout. And part of that is not just putting you at the bottom of a ballot. It's making you the focal point. It's something that I really do believe greatly in, because municipal election day is what we call it, and it's a spotlight that all the municipalities are conducting their election, and voters can know that's when they vote. Part of it, and I also said the early voting period, I mentioned that, you know, right now we're not going to provide a service for early voting because of all those things that we have going on, but if we have odd year November, your voters can vote 15 minutes away rather than driving over 3 bridges to get to North Charleston to vote early. Usually it's people leaving on a flight that vote early for the town of Kiowa. I'm being completely honest. They're on their way out. They're going to vote early but if we're right here on Johns Island, folks know where that is. They voted there in 2022. They'll be voting there in 2024. That's going to be our early voting location we saw a lot of success with.
Well, I think I'm confused. You've given your presentation fine and to impress upon us the importance of even and odd and that. But then this law, the House Bill 3734, that makes it happen. So it's not a matter that you're encouraging us to look at this. It's going to.
So I will say this, it's a good question. So when I talked to Stephanie originally about this, we already had it on our radar to address council about this issue. The bill was filed by Brandon Newton, who's the lead election law sponsor in the House, co-sponsored by Representative Cobb Hunter, who's the lead Democrat in the House. This has a lot of traction. The issue is, when we get to a point here, once the bill passes, the elections will automatically be in odd year Novembers. However, y'all have an even year election and you can't extend terms. So if this bill passes this year. Say that again,
we can't?
Not under the bill. But currently, prior to this bill passing, you will be able to set the ordinance change to either shorten your term or extend your term to comply with the change to odd year Novembers. This bill will force you to change, but also you're not able to extend your term. So what that looks like is next November, when you're scheduled in December of 2024, you'll have a conflict there, which means you got to start holding your elections in 2025. You're going to have to extend your term, or you're going to have to shorten that term. And it's going to be a speed. Yes, it is confusing, but that's why we're bringing it to y'all's attention to know this has traction. It is a priority that all 46 counties support, is to create this uniformity in our election calendar. So rather than waiting for the bill to pass, council could have more control with an ordinance that would allow them to evaluate, hey, this is what the county would like. We conduct the elections. They brought this to our attention. There's a House bill that would address this as well. But if we get out in front of this, we can not impact future elections in a negative way. It would actually in a positive way. Yes, sir.
Let me make sure I understand what you just said about the extensions and so
Yes,
forth.
sir.
So let's say we don't do anything in the short term and we have our election in '24. And we're elected for 4-year terms. You're saying if the bill passes,
you will have to shorten all your terms.
we would have the people that just got elected in '24 might only have a 3-year term as
Correct.
opposed to a 4, because we've got to have that odd year.
That is 100%
And you can't go
correct.
past 28 would be the problem. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
The bill says you cannot extend your term.
Somebody who was elected only for 2 years
Oh.
would then need to run for re-election after 1 year.
But only 2 years if they fill it. Okay, got it.
So the bill's out there, but let's just pretend the bill does not exist. We are presenting a lot of things that have happened, because I told this to Stephanie, that competing timeline is a real thing in our office. It really is. I'm being completely sincere. We conduct our elections by ordinance, and that is something that we take pride in, and we take great joy in doing that. But there is a competing timeline every single even year with all the things that are going on in the preparation of a major election, that we want to be able to be good stewards of full attention to not, oh no, we have Kiowa coming up. That's not the response we want to ever have. Our response is to be, hey, fully prepared, fully engaged, because we're spending $1 million on a countywide election that is pouring all resources. Like our staff, we have to hire thousands of people to support this election. That is really, I'm defined by a failure of a presidential election, seriously. And if we have sometimes a conflict there, I have to look at where's the bigger picture of the elections. And I truly believe, this is my heart of hearts, a coordinated election schedule in the state of South Carolina is coming. and it starts here in the municipal level, that we can have good election schedules. Voters will know when their elections are, and you don't have that fatigue issue that kind of happens at the end of the year, especially a lot of times we get voters, well, is it too late? It's like, yep, you missed the deadline to get your absentee ballot or early vote.
Are we the only municipality for which you were responsible that has a December even-year
Yes.
election?
By law, you are the only municipality that we have ordinance to conduct your elections in December. The other 4 have their own municipal election commissions. And by ordinance, we don't conduct those elections. We conduct yours. You are the only ones that we conduct that are in December of an even year, or outside of a November odd year. Every single other, we have 11.
We don't want our own municipal election commission, do we?
Well, I know there's probably a petition going around right now that they just want us here for life, but I don't think, I'm still a little bit confused. Isaac, so Stephanie
Yeah,
can
I guess
explain.
if you can just,
Do you want us to do something?
I guess just make it, just simplify it. So to say, well, just that, if you can just say, okay, so we have 3 council members who was elected, well, 3 seats that had 2020 election, which means that they come up in 2024.
Right.
So, and then we have 2 seats that's 2022 and come up for 2026. So the ones that were, the 3 seats in 2020 that come up in 2024, if they decide to do nothing, she said if the governor signs this in May, it becomes a requirement of odd years. But if we decide, if council decides not to do anything and let that governor sign, what happens then, and then what happens in 2024? So what happens with this current election?
What will end up happening is your term, the law says that all municipal elections will have to be conducted in 2025. So if this bill passes this year, council has 90 days to change your ordinance to make it into November of odd years, starting in 2025. That will be an issue because you can't extend your terms. So what will end up having to happen is we'll have to have an election this November.
This November 23.
November 23, or we would have, we would allow y'all to make that decision through council action, changing your ordinance now. So the ask would be, the ask from Charleston County Board of Elections voter registration is to change your ordinance to have odd year November elections, and it would be the easiest way you can determine. You can shorten your terms, starting this year, say, okay, everybody who was up in 2024, you're not gonna run in 2023, or you can say, everybody who's gonna have their term end in the even year 2024, we're just extending it 11 months to November 2025.
So the November, or the December 2024 election that we normally have will go away.
Correct. And it will go into,
23, or they can do it in.
or they can extend their term.
Right.
So really you have two
Shorten it
two
1
options.
year or extend it 1 year?
Shorten 1 year or extend 1 year. And I believe that whatever y'all decide, that's up to you. You make that decision, but it's kind of one of those things where if the bill passes, you don't have the option of extending.
And Joe, was it you that had circulated something that said that under, the view was under current law, absent this bill,
Attorney
that state
General's
law
opinion.
would allow either to shorten or lengthen?
I think it's the Attorney General's opinion, sir.
Attorney General opinion,
There's
was
two,
that it? Okay,
there's two
okay.
Attorney General's opinion that
Okay.
support that.
Okay.
And it has been done in other municipalities like TKK. There's numerous others. In Spartanburg County, this has happened. So I bring that to y'all because I know you're not going to make an action today, but this is our viewpoint that this is a strong position of the Charleston County Board of Elections who conducts your elections, that we would love to see an ordinance to move y'all to November of odd years. To coordinate with all the other municipalities that we do on that same date. Any other? And we can have, and if you have any further questions, you have a one-pager in front of you that can kind of just highlight what were the pros and what we're talking about. But any other questions, Stephanie has my phone number. We can set up a meeting. We can talk through some of that, because usually what will happen here, and Joe works well with Christy Varnado, who's my chair. We can set up, ordinance language, what it looks like, what is that, what does this all mean? We can dive deeper.
Is there any chance that this law is not going to be approved?
I think any bill, there's always
Yeah.
a chance for that.
No,
Yes.
I understand that. but
Yeah.
66% says 33% are not doing it this way. I mean, are they marshaling their forces? Are people really are municipalities in opposition to this?
The MASC supports this bill. The Municipal Association supports this bill. This bill would not have been filed without the MASC's support. and that's straight from Representative Newton. He would not have filed that bill. And a lot of the language in the bill is because MAC provided feedback on specific items. So, and this is a top priority for Charleston County and then the 46 counties in the state.
So maybe in slight adaptation of John's question, so do you see these 36% other municipalities to actually start thinking about changing their ordinances?
It's already starting. So one of the things with the State Election Commission, every year they encourage us to go talk to our municipalities to do this. Because what will happen is, it's not just, I talked a lot about the front end, but even on the back end. So election night reporting, how people even know about the results. The state will have a dedicated platform, because right now they don't. Anything that's not in November of an odd year, they don't support.
I think we all get your arguments, but so you see that other municipalities are now seriously considering, being actually ahead of the bill, as you also tried to explain. Is that your perception across South Carolina?
Yes, and we do have a couple of municipalities here in Charleston County with their own MECs wanting to do the same.
Okay.
That conversation's already been started, and I know you're shaking your head yes.
So
it's happening, yes,
okay.
sir.
So second question, from a timeline point of view, to make this all work with either 23 or 24 and 25 or no 24 and 25, so by what date would we need to make decisions as a council to facilitate that change to odd years?
Well, state law requires a 60-day notice for an election. So whatever 60 days before November 7th is, that would be the.
Okay.
So you.
But if we wanted to be ahead of the bill, how long do we have before we have to make a change?
So I was told first reading is going to subcommittee hearing on this bill is going to happen the next 3 to 4 weeks. So it's going to get to the Senate, my guess, in middle to end of April. The session ends, I think, second week of May. And, this is a session, so this bill could be the first agenda item in January 2024 and pass an even year, which creates a whole set of headaches, which I've already brought that up because I said we have two municipalities in Charleston County, Folly Beach, but they have their own MEC, and y'all are the only two municipalities that have an even year election. And the thing with Folly Beach is they're right before our June primaries. So they're kind of on the opposite side. Y'all are on the post side, they're on the pre side. So we do have two, but they have their own MAC. So one thing we're looking forward to is with this bill that's happening, I will be going to Columbia and testifying on it because it is a priority for us as an office.
But you're saying we do have 2 or 3 months.
You do.
To make that decision. And the reason why I'm asking is I think we want to hear the community about this as well. Factually at the end it's our decision, but I think we really want to hear what our community members are saying about that.
Yeah, if we said we were going to extend our terms
accordingly.
by a year, we might get a big community uproar.
Yeah, that is a common question that folks. No, it's completely a valid question. Is extending in a year versus reducing a year? Extending a year has a totally different approach to it. If you're very popular, people are like, yeah, extend a year. But the thing is, at the end of the day,
Give us time.
there is precedent to say extending a term is not the violation of any ordinance or law.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
you have 3 months, most likely, minimum.
That should be enough. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to come. I always enjoy the drive.
Appreciate it.
There's my, could I make a suggestion? Bear with me. Would it be possible for you to take a sheet of paper and to write down all of these alternatives, almost by bullet point, and, send it to each of us individually so that we can mull it over individually? Because I don't disagree in terms of the community reaction, but, we got to, and then maybe indicate, get 23, 25, do nothing, just wait, at least to get a sense from how the 5 of us feel about this. And anyway, the community exercises their reaction by virtue of the election. So if we go 23, they're going to vote. If we go 25, they're going to vote. Right now they voted, and here we are. So I it just seems like that would be very confusing to try to get the community at large to say, well, how long do you want these guys around? So anyway, could you do that stuff and then let's mull it over, and I don't know whether we talk
Well,
about it in April
Mr. Mayor,
or
I
May.
would certainly encourage members of the community here in the audience or those who watch this subsequently to offer, if they have
Yeah.
thoughts on this, to let us know. And I don't know if we want to think about something more formal to go out to try to
Absolutely.
obtain
No,
some.
no.
Definitely,
No, I
but-
meant just, this is just to us. Okay, thank you, Isaac, for coming out. Enjoy your stay. We had a perfect day for you. Old business, status report from town council retreat. Who's handling that? You just have to wait there, young lady.
The way I have this set up is that staff is going to do their portion of the status update first, which you have that tab in your folder, which we'll go through. And then after that, council have some status updates to their work plan before we get into the second item of the agenda. So first up, we have is Mr. Taylor.
Just so I understand, John, so these
So these-
sheets that you all have prepared, these are status reports.
That's correct.
So you and,
So each department, essentially each department from the retreat, so this all stems from the email that I sent out to all of you, to everyone. So each department, with the exception of building, will have a status update.
Right. Because remember, John, we said in the retreat that,
Yep.
following or starting with this meeting, we will have each month the different work groups report to the community about their status.
okay. As they say, the tops of the waves, could you just?
Yeah, so there's essentially four principal action items that I've provided for you to give an update on. The first was a comprehensive landscape and tree preservation ordinance that was discussed. Oh, they're up there? Okay, sorry. There you go. So this is really to memorialize standards for the town. This is under the sort of nexus connected to the sunsetting of the development agreement. And so for the town to memorialize its own landscape and tree preservation standards, where we are today is that's being introduced tomorrow to our planning commission. And so tomorrow, staff will walk through with the planning commission sort of the scope and some nuances of why we're doing this and some things that they would be potentially studying. And then a work group would be formed with a target date to bring back to council, particularly, well, potentially around May. But that would essentially involve a work group with members of community, planning commission to provide a recommendation back to council. Do you want me to continue to all these, or do you want to do?
John, on that one, my recollection from our strategic planning meetings was we had specifically discussed a tree ordinance, and I had drafted a draft one, but that can be taken up obviously by the committee. But we did talk conceptually about potential requirement for native plants. I don't recall, though, that we said kind of a comprehensive set of landscape requirements or standards or ordinances.
So in review of just the tree protection ordinance, it would, and staff had already had sort of this on its list of priorities in 2022. And so to combine those things, it would be a much more efficient effort, because much of what would be desired that come out of a tree protection or tree preservation ordinance will require us to modify how we think about landscaping. So to include the two.
And also, Brad, it was a wish from the environmental committee to also look at not just, protecting the trees, but also, the whole landscaping of space.
The second there is, if any more questions about the first one. The second one there is regarding the 2013 development agreement executed with a master developer. That objective was for the town to really begin to prepare as that ends, in the end of this year, 2023. What steps would the town need to make in short of wrapping up that development agreement, any outstanding conveyances, et cetera, dedications that need to be made either by any entity, whether that's the developer of the town or even KICA. And so to date, staff has met to kind of understand that from a draft standpoint and provided us we've worked on sort of a draft compiled document that shows what would be outstanding and just kind of laying the land of where there might have been formal dedications already made, but some might be in the works. And so putting together a list of sort of a timeline standpoint of these will be expected to be completed by this date, or they have been introduced in concept to one of the review entities. And so April is that timeline of sort of that I've included here that would also have our planning commission begin to look at if there are actual ordinances that need to be amended. And as part of this process of sunsetting the development agreement in end of this year, that we begin to make those formal process begin in April.
So this one here, John, is concerning to me because this is going to be a situation where time is going to all of a sudden be gone. And December is going to be around the corner, and we're only getting the timeline put together in April. Can we do something to speed this up? I'm just concerned we're going to run out of time.
And somewhat related to that, it was Councilmember Berner and I that were kind of tasked to provide council input and involvement in that, and that hasn't yet happened. So,
the idea is that the development agreement would end in 2023, but the required amendments that we understand today, specific amendment, those could occur where the effective date becomes later. So we could pass it in the fall, where that, or late summer rather, and the effective date wouldn't happen until 2024 after the development agreement has expired.
Because this could also include the ARB. I mean,
No, I think that's a separate, that was a separate line item.
Not a separate, we'll
That
come
was a
up
separate
with
one.
Okay.
but John, that may be true of some elements, but there are at least some, one in particular that I'm thinking of, that's not the case, that I think it's critically important that we do something before the end of the year.
Would you want to share this? I can add that, or?
Yes, it is, and I've raised it before, I'll raise it again. It's to rescind the ordinance 2013-14.
So that would just be an amendment to development, that would be an ordinance, but it wouldn't necessarily require us to do a significant amount of lifting outside of reviewing our zoning code, but it wouldn't require us to do to me, I think it essentially just ceases the existing of the development agreement outside of the zoning code. So I think it's a simple text amendment that would occur as that process. The other part that I would add into that, the reason why this timeline is critical, because as part of this process, our work that we're doing with the comprehensive plan to ensure some of the zoning and land use matters that are worked out in that feedback is kind of working hand in glove, if you will.
So can I ask a question? So this last item you've got down here, it says next step, April of 2023, develop timeline for required amendments. Does that mean that in April of 2023, which is only a month away, you will have developed this timeline?
Yes.
So it's not like you're going to start developing a timeline in April. You will have it done in April. That's the plan.
Right.
Okay.
When will we see it? At the town council meeting?
Probably before the town council meeting, but
That's what I wanted to hear,
The actual timeline, it necessarily won't be an action item of town council meeting, but I think just to send it to you all have an opportunity to see and make any adjustments.
So we should see that within a month.
Yeah.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, and I just, John, I want to kind of step back a little bit. It sounds like this is a somewhat narrower focus than maybe necessary. As I'm reading this, you're really focused on the very specific or concrete things conveyances, dedications, and entitlements that are specifically referenced in the development agreement that would have to be addressed before it terminates or sunsets. But it a little bit relates to the ARB issue and others. We need to be thinking more broadly as to whether there are, since a broader set of issues that accompany the end of the development agreement that we need to be thinking about as
I
well.
don't disagree there. I think the ARB is a question that's on the table, and I think staff would lean on council's direction of those conversations of what happens. I think introducing that, my understanding, there might be a work group working specifically on that, but I think
John and I will report, the Councilmember Moff and I will report on that momentarily, but I mean, that's not the only one. There may be others. I guess that's what I'm saying, is that this sounds like it, and it's probably a reason Russ and I need to get together as well.
We do.
the list that has, so that second bullet point that says a rough draft compiled of remaining action items. So the ARB is sort of a bullet point on that list. So it's included in this nuance of everything that needs to be sort of checked or reviewed before this development agreement ends.
I'm looking forward to your timeline.
However, to my mind, there's a difference between, as you're going through a planning process, and we talk about this subject or the whole myriad of subjects that we have in front of us, that the presumptions are that all of the decisions are agreed upon to get to that goal. In other words, we think we may need another building. So you put the new building out there as a goal. But that is just a targeted area. There have to be checkpoints all along the way that I hope you bring forward and say, do you want to buy the land, yes or no? Do you want to get the finance? You know, you have to go through all of that. So I'm just hoping, John, that as it just comes to my mind with this subject, when we think that we're actually going to, when we think that the path that we're on is getting us to a specific goal that maybe not everybody has agreed to. Does that, you know what I'm saying? So I just hope, as you and all of your staff, all of the others are working on all of these objectives, to keep bringing back, yeah, we're looking at this building, yeah, we're looking at all of these things, but do you really want to do, you know, at some point, because I don't want to get the whole ways to the end and saying, here's the package, and the council says, well, we didn't really wanted to do it, we just wanted it to be evaluated or explored or.
I think that's why we wanted to look at this review every month, is so that if we wanted to intercede on any of these, we could do it, as opposed to waiting until the very end of the
Fine.
year.
That's all I'm saying. I don't want, okay.
And speaking of staffing, any update? Speaking of staffing, any update?
Oh, yes. So John informed me that he has hired, he made an offer to a new planner. His start date is on my thing here. It's not on here. When is your start date? 17th of April.
This is going to be a very full plate, and of course, you've also got implementation of the marsh management plan. You've got the comprehensive plan update, and
don't remind me.
Okay.
Continuing, so another action item from the retreat, the review of our land use and planning zoning ordinance. This is actually an item that sort of marries into our Kiowa Next plan of the community evaluating our vision. And so we know that the zoning code essentially is the mechanism in which we can enforce a lot of things that are within our comprehensive plan as a tool. And so our zoning code, as a staff, we want to completely look and review that entire document. And so as we develop our Kiowa Next plan, the idea is that the review of the zoning code would come there shortly after and really go section by section. Of course, there'll be zoning amendments prior to that complete sort of holistic review to some of the ordinances that have already been mentioned. But the idea is to comprehensive look at the zoning ordinance in a whole. For example, our marsh management plan has recommended that we consolidate all of the sort of nuances that relate to the marsh into one section. So that would be something that we would coordinate. And so as proposed now, and that would be something that I developed an RFP for. And so that's being drafted right now. So hopefully that becomes part of fiscal year 24. And hopefully that comes before you very shortly for review.
So John, I have a follow-up question here with respect to what's on this current screen and the one we just saw. The next step in the timeline of events, I really feel from my own background in construction, we need to have names affixed to who is doing what tasks. Because I fear that if, for example, you are going to be involved in 5 or 6 things, then something's not going to get done. So we need to know who is going to be doing items on the timeline, not just what the timeline events are.
Can I add something to that, Russ? I don't think that we need to know which individual of the staff is going to do a specific task so much as we need to have the staff manager that's responsible for that task. John needs to know that, but I don't think he needs to report to us that Billy is going to do this job and Bobby's going to do that job. I don't think that adds anything. We're not supervising the operation.
No, it wasn't from a supervisory kind of perspective. It's just from a planning perspective to make sure that somebody is looking at this and not overloading an individual person. I agree that we don't have to be involved, as you just said, but we need to make sure that somebody is looking at this from an overall perspective.
So my bet is that John has names by every task of the people that are going to do this. And I don't.
Okay, I would
personally,
just
don't
like
see
to,
this
I would just
Yeah.
like to see it, so I can make sure it's
Yeah,
it's
and
good.
in regards to this one that he's referring to, the zoning code update, that really would be a budget discussion, because one of the things we're going to be requesting is a consultant to come in, and essentially after the Kiowa Next plan is completed, the next step would be to completely look at the zoning ordinance, zoning code, and probably overhaul it, which staff would probably then recommend.
And that's all great.
A
That's all.
consultant, which will be through an RFP, and it'll
Right.
be part of the budget discussion, because we're going to put some money, which we put in there, I think about $100,000 as a placeholder.
So a third party is one of the people who is going to do the work, which is fine. I just want to make sure that we have a reasonable plan for getting it all done. Everything, not just one particular item.
Right, yep. And we can add, as we come every month, we'll just have we'll add something on the slide to be able to add timelines to it.
So, Stephanie, where is resident right now the intended or planned review of all other ordinances?
That is something that he's going to discuss,
Okay.
Michael will discuss during his presentation.
The next one on the list there is Betsy Harrison Parkway Overlay Zoning District. Staff has had some soft conversations to date with county staff, as well as members of the Johns Island community, just to kind of get some of a warm-up effect of the likelihood of timeline and interest. We know there's great significant interest to Kiowa and members of Johns Island community. However, I think the nuance of just the timing and resources of the county, the next sort of step, well, let me backtrack there and just kind of give some gauge there of those conversations. About 2-3 years ago, Maybank Highway, Main Road, were highly focused areas for the county to develop overlay zoning districts for Johns Island. So now staff has sort of shifted and moving down to the East Cooper area and working in other areas, parts of the county. That's been an approach, just me being a part of the county staff previously, to kind of know that that's how sort of that rhythm operates, of kind of floating back to ensure all parts of the county are taken care of. I do think that this would be more of a simple task, so I think the next steps is just further advancing that conversation. I've talked to Stephanie maybe of introducing this to Councilwoman Honeycutt, just to just ensure that that consistency is aligned with both staff and county council. And then a formal letter will be sent from the town just to engage, to begin sort of a dialogue formally. But right now, the status sort of that has just been only soft conversations occurring for that Parkway overlay. That was all I had. I will give an update just because it's really fresh. On Friday, we did have our initial work group meeting for the Kiowa Island Comprehensive Marsh Management Plan, and that was a really good dialogue. And so a work plan has been sort of drafted so far that I'll be sharing very shortly. That happened on Friday, so I'm still putting together the notes from that meeting. But just to know that that's sort of our implementation phase has begun.
Thanks, John.
So the finance department has two main goals or priorities that arrive from the discussion at the retreat. And the first one is the evaluation of our fund balances and reserves levels and policies. There has been a discussion for some time already from the residents and from the council, what is the desired or comfortable level of the reserve. So we will look during the budget process that we started last month and will continue through the few more months. We look at some scenarios of, especially for the hurricane scenario, because this is something very likely that can happen. And we'll look at the cost of not just the cleanup, but potential closure and how long can take to revive the island. Just looking at what happened in Florida through Ian, some of those little towns are still not open for the tourists after 6 months. So we looked at through this month at Ways and Means, we look at the expenditures, and next month we can look at the whole picture, revenues, expenditures, and possible scenarios. And this is done. We have initial meetings with the mayor and the mayor pro temp, and the discussion will extend to the council during the Ways and Means meetings. And another one was a look at our investment policy and strategies. My goal is to have an RFP for our banking services. That's something recommended by GFOA every 5-7 years, and I will extend that to possibly look at maybe outsourcing our investment. Currently, we are with LGIP, and but there was a lot of comments about that, so we can look and compare some other options. And the timing for that, ideally I want to do it after the budget is approved, so it is a big time-consuming process, so I'll update on that too with the result. Any questions?
Thank you.
No,
Thank you, Drew.
I'll be presenting the communication action plans. We don't have a communication manager yet. I think we had 2 items on there. We had first the Kika Toki communication process. As you recall, at the retreat, there was discussion about having a Toki and Kika board, essentially having a meeting with all bodies present. I am working with Shannon on that, and so we are in the process of trying to get that scheduled. So I'm sure she'll be working with Kika board chair, and I'll be working with the mayor to try to get something on the books, maybe looking in April or May. So that still is on our agenda. Also, at a meeting, Dr. Hedenfelder did extend. I also extended an invitation to Shannon. I believe we discussed last month, but he also extended it to Jerry, the use of our facility, if the Kika board would like to hold their meetings here. So that invitation has been extended to the Kika board chair and Ms. White. The other item is communication in general. That's work in progress. The review of our methods, content, intentions, et cetera. As that was discussed, we are currently and actively looking at the ways that we can push out communication. Currently, we have our town notes. We've been talking about ways to try to reach a larger audience. While our e-blast that comes out every week as well as part of our town notes, we have about 10 to 11,000 that is signed up, but that's a combination of Arts Council, contractors, residents, daytimers, visitors, et cetera. So we are looking at ways, and we've talked with also the Community Association about doing maybe some one-offs where they would push and encourage property owners to sign up for our various methods of communication, essentially through our e-blast. So we are working and looking at that. We also, of course, going to be able to look at, we have our Town of Kiowa Island app, which I hope all of you guys have on your iPhone or Android. We have that opportunity for residents to be able to talk to us directly. They can report things. If they see something on a road, like Beach Walker, they can take a picture and send it, and it'll go directly to the appropriate staff. So we have, if you're on the beach and you're not quite sure where the dog restrictions are, we have it geo-fenced. So with our app, we have a lot of different things that people can do. So we have, of course, we have that. But we're always just looking at means of pushing out communication. We have hired our communications manager. Her name is Erin Pomrinke, and she starts March 20th. She's actually here today, her and her husband, her family. They are looking for apartments, so they're here. They head back tomorrow, but they'll be, I think she'll be permanently moving here. I think she said next week, but she'll start on March 20th. Real excited to have her. She comes with us. She comes to us from La Plata, Maryland. She has 8 years of experience in communication, so real thrilled. And Mr. Moffitt and I did the interview. We had a number of applicants, and so it was I wasn't necessarily say it was tough, but we did probably narrow it down to about, the top 2, and so we both felt Erin would do a great job for the town. Our website, I am working diligently on that in between all the other roles and responsibilities that I have, but between the communications specialist, Shai, she is also helping me. The goal is to have our new website release the first week of April. So we'll probably do a soft release. My goal is the end of this month, but I am working on it. And so once I release it, there'll probably be a few things that we need to touch here and there. I'll send you all before, of course, we release it. You guys will get like the ability to look at it before it's public. So that's where we're at with communication plan. Any questions?
I just add to that, Stephanie,
yes.
since you and I are meeting about it tomorrow, that as part of that, there
Yes.
will also be a new revamped development resources page that will be
Correct.
available to the community.
That's correct. And right now, a lot of you guys have went to our current website. I put a message on there. It really is not operating properly. So please just bear with us. We know that there's problems there. If you need something, you can't find it, please let me know. I have this ability to try to be able to find it. So just let me know if you can't find anything and you're looking for it right now. But the goal is that website will come down end of this month and our new one will go up. And I think everyone will be very pleased with our new one. We're really excited about it. Great, Craig, you're next.
Good evening. So public safety have two objectives that we're actually in the pre-stage. The first one, as you can see, is the implementing the emergency calling box. We've already established several companies. Of course, a few want to have a sit-down talk before they can provide us with a particular cost. But for right now, we're getting some numbers of an average cost per box between $10,000 to $20,000 per box. That's not including the provider fee. Also, it would be between $300 to $500 for the annual maintenance fee per box. Myrtle Beach is actually Myrtle Beach have 2 emergency calling boxes, but it's not actually on the beach. It's more on the park and in the pier, one pier, I believe. The whole thing about the calling box is to make sure that it's not so much weatherproof, but it's more of weather resistance. And this is why we're going to have a more detailed meeting with several companies to get more of the logistic features to see what's more compatible to the island. And once we have narrowed down, we'll be able to put everything together to get our RFP to present to the council. The goal is to have this done, at least get down to logistics by May. The second.
How many? How many?
That will have to be a recommendation once I present also to our Public Safety Committee, and we'll see what's feasible. The second objective was the implementing an RFP development into about the Swan Police Department. It's also in the pre-stage. Again, we have to present this, which will be a part of our discussion for our next Public Safety Committee meeting, and to organize a subcommittee as well to get a more, to develop a more detailed RFP for this type of project. And we've already looked at, researched about 9 consulting firms that's compatible for what we're looking for. So that's something that we, again, in the pre-stage, we have to sit down and see what's compatible for what we're looking for. But the goal is to be able to provide RFP recommendation to council also by May of 2023.
Very good.
Great.
Very good.
Yep, Brian.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So a couple updates from the Public Works Department. Some things that we talked about in the retreat that that we've kind of narrowed down and are going to put into effect. We want to revamp the Go Green Initiative project for the island. This is something that we tried to start a couple years ago, and it fell through the cracks for a couple different reasons, but it's something that we feel there's been a lot more development, a lot more research, and a lot more kind of testing across different municipalities and communities across the country that we would like to revisit these ideas. And then also kind of with the rise of electric vehicles around the country and particularly on Kiowa, we're interested in finding some opportunities to install some charging stations across the island. And of course, this will take some involvement and cooperation, hopefully with some of the other stakeholders, to include the community association, the golf resort, Fresh Fields, and West. Hopefully they're on the same page with us as wanting to move forward with some of these charging stations.
By the way, he's not here now, but I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I believe that Riverstone and Chris have said, publicly stated, that their intention is to have EV stations on the Andell West property.
And that's really encouraging. We would certainly love to talk with them once they kind of get a little bit further on with their development plan, because that would be a really ideal place to put a charging station. We also are looking to kind of run a second pilot test, particularly with the community association, about battery operated landscaping equipment. This was one thing that we looked into on the first time we did the Green Initiative a couple years ago. The technology just wasn't really there. The equipment, it didn't hold up to what the landscape maintenance crews needed to be. But there's been developments. I've been doing some research and talking with some other people. So we're gonna want to look at doing that again and seeing, as you can see, especially the leaf blower operations. I think that might be the most nuisance thing on the island. So if we could at least maybe start with one piece of equipment, we're gonna look through that. And then we have a plastics ordinance that went through the environmental committee and put into place about single-use plastics, and we're putting a ban on those. But we do think that there's an opportunity to further that. potentially with water bottles, water bottle usage around the island, utensils, things like that. So that's another plan that we're going to look into and see if there's a way that we can reduce it. It may be unrealistic to completely get rid of it altogether, but hopefully to further that effort. Also, too, we're looking at some additional environmental protection activities. So the town, we have purchased our first electric vehicle for our town fleet. It's a Ford Lightning. We've put it into place, and we're kind of putting it through the test to see how well it holds up, which we feel confident that it will. But we want to increase the number of electric vehicles in our fleet. Also, we see a need for more regular hazardous waste pickup. We just see these items being disposed of improperly around the town, and the town staff is wanting to kind of make that a little more streamlined, a little more organized, and approachable for people to dispose of that hazardous material properly. And
Brian,
then
I'm sorry, Brian, to interrupt for a second. I've noticed many a times at the Sorrel Rail facility, not a lot, but occasionally hazardous materials dropped off there. I used to see a camera there. I don't know if it's operating or not, but is there any plan to get those people who are dumping things off illegally?
Yes, sir. We have actually issued citations for that,
There is. Okay.
because we can go back and look and take that. We're hoping that with the new site, it's going to be a lot more conducive for people to dispose of things properly. But of course, there's always going to be people that don't throw away things the way they're supposed to. But yes, we're on top of that.
Great,
and
thanks.
we're even thinking that potentially we can see if there's an opportunity at Kestrel Court to create a little section for hazardous waste collection. So we'll just see. We're kind of going over a couple of different ideas about how we can do that.
Great, thanks.
Yes, sir. And then last thing, we're wanting to kind of do some pilot testing with some solar paneling. And there's a couple different ideas that we could implement. We want to see how well the solar paneling does on this site to see if it's something that we can move up and potentially use for the greater part of this building. But we might, well, without getting too far into it, we have some ideas of how we want to test that to see if it's a really good option to move up to a bigger scale, as in, put on the roof of this building or in a field to power this building. So these are really just kind of not too much to report on, but just to kind of let the community know and make it publicly available for everyone to know that these are our commitments, these are our goals that we're going to be working through. However, I do have one update as far as the charging stations. We've had a lot of conversations with some different companies, and I actually had a conversation with Berkeley Electric, and they have some really enticing incentives for us to install electric charging stations. So that's something that we're going to have a meeting set up with them. They'll help us with the infrastructure and also subsidize a big chunk of the cost. So that's something that we're going to get all the details worked out with. I told them that we don't have a full plan yet, but just to know what they could offer us, it might help us with our progression on that. So
can I offer just one suggestion?
Yes, sir.
When we review the status of these items next time, it would be nice to have something that is kind of some dates on when you're going to actually do some of these things. Maybe not necessarily a work plan set of dates, but at least when you think you'll have activities that take place.
Absolutely. Again, I was, didn't get too far in all of the research, but once we have, we're kind of putting together a more formal, I don't want to say like a charter, but a more formal kind of document to put together this Go Green work group that's going to include these stakeholders. That hasn't been done yet, but once we have that formal invitation and we have people that can meet with us and we can put these ideas together, we'll have a better idea of what's what the timeline looks like. And I'll be sure to have something of that nature to you all at the next meeting.
Okay.
Are you envisioning constituting that Go Green working group or task force?
Well, so it came together really nicely last time. Everybody's on board with it. So we reached out to the different stakeholders, the people that we thought would serve best, and they added people to it as they saw fit. And again, it came together really well, but just some different things, not to get all into it, but just kind of fell through. It was received really well. So we'll be reaching out to the same people again. We'll have a tighter plan and a little more organization that will hold it together this time.
I guess what I'm asking, if there are members of the community that are very interested in this issue and have some relevant background experience, how do they have an opportunity to get involved? So how?
Brad, let me ask you. So I finally had the time to put the project plan together over the last few days. Just had to set some priorities. And I will share this with Brian and Stephanie, of course, and then also with you guys for your input. And this Go Green, work group will consist, as Brian said, of course, representatives from Kika and the resort and the club, the conservancy, etc. But we also want to have people from the community being part of this. So I wanted to also reach out to the community by doing this now to say whoever feels well prepared to be part of this group, please forward that either to Brian or me or Stephanie so that we can form this work group as soon as we have the work plan approved by all of us and can move forward.
Anything else? All right, thank you all.
All right, thank you all. I guess I'm the last one here. Just a couple main items that came out of the retreat for the environmental department, and we haven't, as the slide says, we haven't gotten to really starting any of these at this point. We're still in the midst of our intense field season, which I'll take the opportunity just to give you a very, very quick update on that. So January, February, March is when we're doing our bobcat trapping, as well as our deer harvest program. So both of those programs, the deer harvest program is complete. It was completed February 17th through the 20th. 2,475 pounds of venison was donated. 1,175 went to the Little Rock Holiness Church in Cottageville, and 1,300 pounds went to 180 Place in Charleston, South Carolina. Bobcat trapping is still underway. We've caught 6 bobcats so far, 4 females and 2 males. So then just to run through, the items here on the slide, the first 2 really deal with communications. The first bullet is just to continue, educating the public on a lot of our research programs and the wildlife on the island, but also to increase those and kind of get into some new areas. So we look forward to doing all of that. We'll certainly be working closely with the new communications manager on a lot of this, because obviously the communications department will be very involved as well. I guess one other big item that came up at the retreat was concern over the use of pesticides and fertilizers on the island, in particular on golf courses, but also in residential backyards. So certainly we have a plan to work with the Conservancy as well as others to have a good, strategy to address those issues, recommendations, community outreach, to better inform the public on what they can do, and also work with the golf courses to try to make some, positive changes. And then the last bullet is simply to support, there are a lot of these projects that came out of the retreat that'll touch multiple departments. And so, for example, the marsh management plan falls under the planning department, but certainly there are environmental issues involved in that. And so certainly my team as well as the environmental committee will be involved in those areas as needed. Same goes for the landscaping and tree protection ordinance, which we'll be reviewing here shortly. All I have, unless anyone has questions. All right, thank y'all.
John, Michael?
Yeah. Okay. To a few updates for the projects that have been assigned to council members. So I start with the Ordinance and Regulation Review Project. We have created a first, I think, solid plan how we want to tackle this issue. For maybe your recollection, we believe that there are a number of ordinances that are old and require update. They might be ordinances that are requiring procedures that are just not state-of-the-art anymore. There might be ordinances that are incomplete, and there might even still be ordinances that are not in full compliance with state law. So that's the target, to go through our book of ordinances and to review them in detail. That work plan has been developed, has been reviewed by Stephanie, and I will forward that to the other council members later today for their review. If we are all in agreement, we can actually start soon, but we have to understand this is a really small step by small step process. This cannot be done within a few weeks. This will probably reach well into the end of this year, maybe even a little bit, into next year, because of just the sheer amount of ordinances that we need to look at, and also the process of trying to make sure that whoever believes has a valid point to be included in the consideration, that we reach out to these different constituencies. As I said, there are key questions that we are going to ask during this process that I've outlined here. I think there's no need necessarily to go into the details, but you will receive the document, my council member colleagues here, for your review and input, and then the team can start, and the team consists of Stephanie, myself, Russ is involved. We might also come to a point where we need maybe some help from the outside for performing some of these things. A key intention really is to use common sense, but also to look at other municipalities where we can learn from them and adapt it to our needs. That's the process.
Michael, do you think there'll be an opportunity, if there's really low-hanging fruit, some ordinances that should be and can easily be revised, to do so without having to kind of wait through the end of the process?
That's why I'm saying the step-by-step process is basically looking, adapting, creating the review process that is necessary, and implementing it. So it's not all waiting for the very end, but it's an ongoing process of us adapting whatever we feel is necessary.
The one that Maura mentioned at the outset in the Ways and Means Committee is a classic, is a good example of that, which is a requirement that the mayor personally negotiate a contract with the audit firm and cannot delegate that.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a good starting point, and I expect your input then in the coming days to help us to complete the project plan, and then the team can start working on this, and we will provide monthly updates. Okay, next topic. It's something that Brad and I are working on for a more comprehensive volunteer policy. We don't really have this right now, but we experience that there are several areas where we want to be more precise, also more helpful to the volunteers, and also make sure that we have a fair, equal, and appropriate way of including volunteers into our activities as a town. So there has again been a work plan defined, and I'm expecting Brad's input in the following days. And then I will also share that with the other council members for their input. And then we have, again, similar to before, a comprehensive plan that we can then move forward with, and I envision this is probably becoming something like an ordinance that we would then, push through the regular process with community involvement, et cetera.
And it would be appropriate to mention the adjunct to that, which is we're not just a little bit further behind, so it's not subject to a slide, which is a ethics and gift and entertainment and conflicts of interest set of policies that would pertain to elected officials, council members, members of committees, commissions, and the like, as well as employees. And so we're in the process of developing that, and just a little iteration before it's ready to share with everyone.
And then last of my updates, I believe, during the retreat, the idea came up to look into a possibility to create a display of some kind, which at the end could become a museum or something of that kind, that would really display the actually very rich history and heritage of this island to both the community but also visitors to the island, and I assume also to surrounding schools from Johns Islands, etc. So a couple of first contacts have been made. I have another meeting tomorrow, for example, to just with people that are engaged in this area, to learn what already exists, what ideas could be created, to funnel that into maybe something like a first concept for something like a Kiowa Heritage display, which would then entail a proper location, and surrounding for such displays / museum, and also outlining what we would be interested in displaying, and who would really help us with the curating of these topics. I would hope that maybe somewhere around the May timeframe we have something to share with the community. In that context, also please, if there are other members in the community that have a really passion for history and the heritage of our island, please reach out to me, because this will certainly then be created by, again, a work group that should include community members as well. And just as a side note, something that also came up in the retreat is this old schoolhouse here, just adjacent to the property of our town center here, that could become a place, or at least a building. It's probably not the appropriate place for something like a museum, but it could be an interesting idea to use the house in a different location as the venue for something like this. And we have restarted discussions about that. Okay.
Guys?
Oh, yeah, last topic, that was number B, I believe, right? So I think ever since we started the campaigning for our roles here in the town council, but even more since, and it was a special meeting even that we had in the town council as part of the retreat to talk about communication. Stephanie already outlined a couple of other activities that she is performing with the town staff, with hopefully the new communication manager, and then also Brad is involved in several activities. But we really wanted to create a platform that would enable us as a council to be in more regular community or centric and transparent exchange and communication with our community. So what we are going to create is what we call a community drop-in meeting, which is going to take place every Friday after the town council, between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. This meeting, the first meeting, is scheduled for this week, Friday, actually, March 10th. And the community has the opportunity to meet Councilman John Moffett and myself for at least 2 hours. You have the opportunity to drop in and ask questions, voice concerns, provide us with feedback, criticism, as long as it's civil, of course. So anything that is on your mind, on your heart, this is the platform for it. It is, of course, part of our FOIA requirements, so there will be an agenda, but there will be an official opening and an official closing per se. You can drop into this meeting anytime between 9 and 11. The first location will be here in the town center, but the idea is, and we already spoke with Kika about this, that we might want to rotate these meetings every other month between here, the town center, and the Sandcastle to be closer to the community. So we believe, John and I believe, that this is a great opportunity for the community to reach out to us and to have hopefully a very vital exchange of ideas. No decisions, of course, will be made during these meetings, but we hope that we get a lot of good input and advice from the community for the further work of the town council. These meetings will rotate. So yes, John and I will start, but then all other council members, of course, will rotate through these meetings on a regular basis so that you have a chance to talk to all 5 of us. We believe we will always do this probably with 2 of us, just to handle the large number probably of community members that will come to these meetings. But we will also see how this works, and we will evolve the concept over time based also on your feedback. Aside from this, and again, this starts this Friday, March 10th, between 9 and 11 in this room. No? Not in the conference room behind us. Okay, that's fine. And I would really encourage the community to take advantage of these meetings and come and have a cup of coffee with us and tell everything that's on your mind. There will,
If I may.
please.
So if you have questions, then our goal would be to answer them on the spot. But if we can't answer them, or may require a little research, then what we're going to commit to is be able to get back to you within 3 to 5 business days, so that you don't, have to wait till the next council meeting or whatever, but certainly the next week.
There are a couple of other ideas that we are contemplating at the moment. I would consider the drop-in meetings as a real good way to start this, but there are also some other ideas. We might have special drop-in meetings. I think there was one topic coming up today where maybe that would be appropriate for having something like this. We also want to take our podcasts, which actually have been really well perceived by the community, to the next level and introduce additional formats and have this more in an interactive style with maybe 2 council members being interviewed about a specific topic. We want to invite other members of the wider community from Kika maybe, or from the resort or from the club to these kind of podcasts and share their views and answers to certain questions. So we want to really take this a little further. We might even take that to the lawn in Freshfields and do it in an open live session so that people that can walk by actually drop in and ask questions. So those are some further ideas we are contemplating at the moment. What I think is relatively soon going to take place is the last bullet point on this page that we want to call regular community outreach office hours. So 1 council member will be available every Monday from 9 to 12, again here behind us in the executive conference room. And again, whoever wishes can drop in and have a cup of coffee with us. This will again be on a rotating basis, and we will announce the first date when we will start this after further consideration here from everybody in the council. Thank you.
All said, John, Michael? Thank you, guys.
I'm sorry, before we're still on old business, I just wanted to provide an update. Again, my apologies, no slide, but one of the other action items coming out of the strategic planning retreat was the decision by the council to also establish a task force or working group to review architectural review issues on Kiowa Island. That's headed by Councilmember Moffitt and myself. We've met and discussed that, and what we decided at the time, and we can reinforce that, is it would be ideal if that could be a joint task force with Toki and KICA. Given that, we reached out to the KICA leadership, the board chair, Jerry McGee, and other members of the KICA board with regard to seeing if we can establish a process, a more formal process for having a joint Toki-KICA task force. And at the request of KICA, we put together kind of a more formal two-page document that provides some background, purpose and scope, composition of the task force and process and output. And that is now before KICA. They haven't had an opportunity to formally review and act upon it, but our hope is that they're able to do so in fairly short order. It was our intention to examine a range of issues, likely conduct a public hearing, one or more public hearings at some point, and probably have the task force issue 2 reports, one of which would be fairly short-term, maybe 60 to 90 days, that would make recommendations with regard to some low-hanging fruit, a number of issues related to kind of ongoing practices and policies, particularly the interaction between the town and the ARB and potentially KICA and the ARB, and then a longer, a second report that would focus on establishing longer-term recommendations with regard to what should happen with regard to architectural review issues on the island long term. And one aspect of that is the fact that under South Carolina state law, municipalities are specifically empowered to establish architectural review boards should they determine to do so, and particularly given the upcoming end of the development agreement, whether it would be appropriate for the town to establish an architectural review board. If so, what should be its scope and principal purpose, or should architectural review functions over the longer term be properly resident under the homeowners association? So those are the kinds of issues that we will we anticipate looking at and making recommendations with regard to.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Very interesting. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank your staff. Thank the council. Hopefully, this means a routine, ongoing mechanism to provide feedback. So I hope you found it of interest. Now, jumping to D.
So, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I was just going to comment on D.
Yeah. This has already gone through the Ways and Means Committee. So, what were you going to say?
So this comes to Town Council as a recommendation from Ways and Means to consider approving the $75,000, though with the caveat, which is a little different than the actual title there. The caveat, as I recall, is to be able to, out of the $75,000, is to fund the cost of the walking trail and any additional money that is left over would go towards the purchase of the property. In addition, the funds would not be released until they have clear approval from the Greenbelt Fund, Charleston County Greenbelt Fund, and of course, they are submitting to get reimbursed back from the town for the cost for the walking trail and the residual cost or the amount left over from the $75,000 purchase. Do you guys recall if that's about the recommendation that comes from Ways and Means?
I recall that. Lee, does that cause you any heartburn? I mean, is that? They're coming up, so it must.
Yes, so Lee Bundrick, Kiowa Conservancy. I think there was still kind of an open conversation about where those funds would go, because we were thinking the 75 would go to the purchase, and potentially there was a proposed option of having it split, and we weren't sure I just don't recollect that that was kind of like the end goal. Because I remember that there was a stipulation about Greenbelt funding being needed in order to get the funds, but I think having some clarity about what the funds would go in towards for the town's ideas would be helpful.
I think it's a desire on the part, I think it's a desire on our part that as a portion, amount to be determined, of the funds that we would contribute would be directly beneficial to the community. That they would have something. They could walk or look or participate in some way and think that that's, as would we. Just to co-sponsor the acquisition of the asset, the property itself, you know, the fundamental question is why? So this way it gives us something a little bit more tangible.
And in that regard, Lee, you might share that, you know, part of the overall project cost is not just the acquisition, but the improvements on the site. And I think it was the view of the Ways and Means Committee that some of that $75,000 be specifically allocated to the improvements, particularly the path and any, you know, other issues related, you know, potential venues within the property that would be used for lectures or group tours or things like that.
And I think that along these lines, you know, it's hard to say which dollar bills are going to be used for which thing.
Right.
But I think the notion was that the $75,000 might be okay as long as it went to some community activities there, but the reimbursement wouldn't occur until after the Greenbelt and after the property was the sale was closed. It was a reimbursement up to $75,000 with designated funds towards that.
And I believe that was going to be in fiscal year '24, correct?
But again, the idea really is that we want to dedicate some of the funds explicitly to the nature trail and the educational facilities that you wish to create on the property, because I think that is really close to our heart. I think that's something the community can benefit from. This is what our visitors will benefit from, and this is where we would like to take ownership a little bit in making sure that this really takes place, and that we can really promote that also to both the community but also the visitors as a great place to visit if, as we also discussed, you know, find a way to solve the parking issue. Okay?
Yeah, that clears up.
Okay,
So we need a motion?
we would need, is that okay with your arithmetic in terms of how you,
Yeah, and I think,
as
and
John
maybe
says,
that
move
could
the
be,
dollars around?
yeah, and I think that could probably be something we can discuss about how, like, what percentages and what portions of that in there, because I mean, I don't know if y'all are thinking half and half, or, you know, what portion of that would go into it, so.
Yeah.
That's fine.
All right.
Yes, a motion, please.
Okay, so I would like to put the motion forward that we approve the $75,000 contribution by the town of Kiowa Island to this project.
Second.
Under the condition we just talked about, I should add, right?
Please.
Yes.
Second? Any other discussion?
Mayor, if I might, I do want to just come back to, I think, the issues questions that were raised by Maura at the outset, because I suspect others in the community may have similar questions. It just, again, it's one council member's perspective that, you know, we have significant surplus funds. Personally speaking, I could think of really no better use for those funds than protecting what is special about our low country environment, and not only on Kiowa Island, but the gateway to Kiowa Island as well. So if there's an opportunity to protect and put into conservation easement some of the property around Johns Island that becomes available for one reason or another, I would be fully supportive of that. Obviously, it's going to depend on the particular, you know, facts and circumstances, and there may other issues that arise that would need to be discussed. But I'm personally very supportive of that. Whether or not that is acquired directly by the town, property, there's an opportunity for the town to directly acquire property, or it's done through a conservancy. And from my perspective, it doesn't have to be necessarily the Key Island Conservancy. It could be the Coastal Conservation League or the Low Country Land Trust. So if there are opportunities that are presented to us, you know, my inclination is to look on those favorably, but the devil's always in the details. But I appreciate that the Kiowa Conservancy came to the town. I appreciate that they were frank with us, that they intend to go forward with this and have the resource to do so, regardless of whether they get Greenbelt Initiative funding or town funding. But again, as I stated previously, to the extent that we can further leverage their resources to be able to do more of this, I think is a good thing.
And if I may, I think one thing that we didn't mention here that did come up in Ways and Means is that their ability to secure the Greenbelt funding is improved by the fact that we would be participating in it, and it would give the Greenbelt folks the notion that there is community support.
And I know I've heard many, many, many times that one of the driving reasons that any of the citizens here have come to Kiowa in the base case is the environment. And the environment doesn't end at Kiowa's front gate. So I am all for this.
Yep, me too.
Yeah, I would really support this as well. The only thing, Brad, which probably requires a little bit more discussion in the future, where our willingness ends geographically, right? So when you were saying everywhere on Johns Island, I might have a little hesitation here. But if it is exactly as Russ said, right, if it's along the way that we use to come to this island, might it be, you know, Betsy Carrington River, maybe Main Road, we'll need to see how far we want to go. I think that should be clearly supported by us. If it's somewhere else on Johns Island, maybe, you know, that might become really a question. But this probably is so close to our entrance and is supposed to really protect some of that wonderful part of the environment around us. So I would also fully support that.
It's an easy call.
And we didn't put up slides. I mean, that was done at Ways and Means, but for those of you who are not aware, I mean, Lee or you guys, Kala, you can describe this, but it's a parcel that is just say south or west of the kinfolk in Hemingway. And then, so it fronts along Betsy Carrington Parkway, then goes all the way back towards the river. Yeah. And you have a hope of also potentially acquiring or gaining some easement rights on a contiguous property as well.
Well, that and the fact that with the qualify excess reserves, we don't have that level of excess reserves. Well, I'm encouraged that I think, and I know Donna will take advantage of this, you know, the extent to which as you have donor events and grant writing event opportunities, that this can be additive, that you have a community that's, you know, really supporting. Okay. All in favor? I think we've had the motion in the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Public hearing. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lee.
Do we have, what is?
John, so you have a public hearing and first reading.
Taylor.
John Taylor. He'll come up and present, and then you can open up for the public hearing, and then you'll close it, open and close.
Do we have to make a motion to have a public hearing?
Yeah.
So I move that we open a public hearing.
Well, I think John was going to do a quick presentation first before you do it.
I didn't know he had to do that. Oh.
I do not have any slides for you. It's fairly simple. So this is in regards to our public hearing procedures, particularly case AZO 23-000001, proposed text amendment. And so in our current zoning ordinance, it dictates that we have a 300-foot radius to personally notify properties in the vicinity for public hearing procedures. And so the request before you today for first reading and a part of public hearing is that radius be increased from 300 foot to 500 feet. Today, our public hearing procedures are a method in which include a number of number of methods in which we notify the public for a particular case. And so I just wanted to just, in your materials, you'll see that on the second page of the memo, that as part of our current public hearing procedures, we're required to notify the public via a published notice, which is done through a newspaper, which is a posting courier. We post a property, which is a zoning sign placed on the property, which is adjacent to the nearest right-of-way. And a personal notice is what, that third one, the personal notice is which is before you today for review. As part of the recommendation, which was granted approval by the Planning Commission, they also requested that this be further studied by the towns to look at all of the methods in which public notifications are evaluated. And for you, I included on your dais just an example that came up at the Planning Commission of what a radius looks like, so you can compare the two. I pulled the last two Board of Zoning Appeals cases. You can see the radius of a 300-foot versus 500 feet in map form to see how many properties would be notified with that change from a 300-foot radius to a 500-foot radius.
Okay, thank you. Could I have a motion to go into, to have a public hearing?
Second.
Any discussion? We are now in a public hearing.
I just want to make one comment to what John said. I think the extension from 300 to 500 would also align our ordinances to the same measurement. So, for example, in terms of the annexation policy, I believe I came across that recently. It's also talking about 500 yards, so it would just be the same distance, you know, to be handled for town staff in all of these communication matters.
That's a little bit different, but
Just remember, right now we're in a public hearing,
Yeah,
so if you can
let's-
ask if anyone wants to speak in favor or not, then
Yeah.
once we close it, you can add additional
We'll get to
comment.
that. So are there any public comments? Could I have a motion to come out of public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
The only discussion or issue I'd want to raise, Mr. Chairman, is I think it's perfectly fine in this case, but otherwise, I'm not a big fan of the combining public hearings and first reading during a council meeting, if it's a much more substantive matter. So just going forward, but on fairly innocuous stuff like this, I think it's fine. But
Okay, fair enough.
One notation that I wanted to also include as part of the record, the ordinance does increase to 300 to 500 feet, but there is one sentence that was being stricken from the particular ordinance, which is the last sentence of section C. After having further discussion with that, staff was recommending that that sentence remains in, but the last sentence there that is in section C, failure to provide this notice would not invalidate any action taken, because it does substantiate what state law outlines.
I'm not sure I understand that last point, because I was happy to see that language stricken originally, but but you're suggesting now unstrike the stricken language?
Yeah.
And is that required by state law to unstrike that language?
No. Essentially, that last sentence is a catch-all, and so it adds a level of protection that we've reached all the minimum requirements for our state statute requirements of public notice. What we are outlining is that we're going beyond the state requirements.
That's fine, but I'm being caught by surprise that you're now suggesting that what was presented to us was that language was being stricken, language that I thought was problematic in the first instance, and to the extent that the town fails to provide appropriate notice to affected parties, that should be an issue that affected parties could use to challenge the action taken. And this suggests that they can't.
No, so there would be for state law, they would still be able to do it because it's at the minimum requirements.
I am confused.
Yes, yeah. We're establishing requirements that the town wants to, is imposing on itself. And then we're saying, but if we don't meet those requirements, never mind.
Yeah, I'm not for that either, Brad. I don't think that's reasonable.
I mean, it's the pleasure of council, but that was just staff's recommendation.
What was the recommendation of the Planning Commission?
I'm not sure I understand when it was in originally, what was the purpose of that statement? I mean, I can read it, but.
Joe, can you help out? Just let him handle that.
It's more of a.
Yeah. It's just, it's a measure that is contained broadly with other municipalities, and I think there's probably some state law that echoes it, with the idea of avoiding fights over technical violations.
I think this would do just the opposite, to be
Shoot the
honest.
messenger. I'm just explaining, you know, the thinking behind this language is that, you know, well, it's just what I said.
No, I hear you.
So if you have this requirement to do this personal notice, and let's say you do it appropriately, and then you make a decision on the question, then life goes on. But if you've got that statement in there, and you have failed to do this noticing, and then you make that decision, basically if leaving this in would say that it wouldn't invalidate that decision. So, I mean, if you really wanted to be sinister about it, you wouldn't notify anybody of anything.
Yeah, that's you can never provide any notice and it'd be okay.
Yeah. You could intentionally not notify the most affected party.
And go,
Right.
whoops, I didn't mean to do that, but you have no recourse. So I'm not sure I like having it
All I
stricken,
can do
I
is
think.
explain my understanding of why
I
that was
get it.
in there.
But the other question, John, is what really came from the Planning Commission to the council? The striked out sentence?
Yes.
Or with the
Yes.
sentence being in place?
To stroke it out.
The strike, the
Planning-
strikeout. So
Right.
that's the recommendation from the Planning Commission.
And staff's recommendation is to leave it in. And then obviously, council, you guys can have a discussion. You can decide to stay with Planning Commission's recommendation to strike it or staff's recommendation to leave it.
And not only would I be opposed to unstriking it, I think I agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. Eliminating that sentence would not necessarily mean that failure to provide notice would result in an invalidation of a decision. But putting it in there.
Says it will not invalidate.
Yeah, it's a definitive statement, not may. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Not
I would
for it.
I would support the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Strike it.
So would I, but not, yes.
I think I would too.
Yeah.
You know, I told John differently before this meeting, but I don't think I really took time to think what this paragraph was about.
Okay, did we have a motion?
So I think if we have a motion, it would be, I move to accept this change to 500 feet with the recommendation from the Planning Commission to strike that last sentence.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
John, did you get that?
Yep.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And last on this list, also at the Ways and Means Committee, was the proposal from Waldron and Jenkins for audit services. I don't know, we talked about that quite a bit at the audit committee, a lot of discussions. Anything to add? Anybody relative to that?
Mr. Mayor, did you have an opportunity to
I reviewed everything.
negotiate with the?
Yes.
That's okay.
Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Oh, God. Last item. Let me talk for a few minutes. Our crowd is increasing. We've captioned this item to discuss all possible options to improve and enhance vehicular and pedestrian circulation at the main gate, including the Kiowa Island Parkway, Beachwalker Drive intersection, contiguous land, main sale office, site, and the upper Beachwalker parcels. So we've specifically described this in as broad a term as we could. Let me provide some context. After the election and our new council members were sworn in, John, Michael, and myself reached out to Kiowa partners, specifically Jordan Phillips, to see if we could discuss the possibility of looking at this very critical site. Quite frankly, this could be the most important site on this entire island. As you all know, the partners have received preliminary site approval for the upper Beachwalker sites. Town has completed a traffic plan for changes to the intersection. Construction is pending. Last year, we explored the possibility of the town acquiring the real estate office, the real estate building, and site for possible relocation for the guest pass functions. So there were activities underway, none of them coordinated necessarily. Jordan agreed to have these discussions. And since the first of the year, Michael and I have had a series of discussions with he and Mark Primar. They have been very constructive. We felt that there should not be any additional ones pending today's meeting to inform all members of the council and the community as to what was being discussed. Let me be clear, there is not a deal. There is not an agreement. There is not a plan, and the partners have not stopped planning for this site. Okay? There is, however, a desire for this initiative to assess potential infrastructure improvements, revisions to development standards, and/or refinement of operational procedures in the general area of the intersection of the Kiowa Island Parkway, Beachwalker Drive, including existing and potential future land uses. This is the beginning of the process. The process will include the town, the partners, the community association, resort, members of the community. It would be our intention to review building setbacks, commercial sizing, residential density, building heights, and permitted use. We hope to improve and enhance the arrival departure of our property owners, resort guests, visitors, and service providers, as well as standards that would influence the character of future development and preserving the main gate. Tomorrow, Michael and I will be holding a podcast to present this initiative, and on Friday, Michael and John will be hosting an open house meeting with community, which you've already heard of, and I have no doubt this will be an agenda item. So for today, there is nothing brought forward to approve, no decisions to be made, no actions to be taken. We will provide frequent updates on progress and hopefully in the very near future, and have something more substantive for the council and community to react as this initiative begins to form. But we felt it's important to tell everybody what we were doing. So, Michael, who has been extremely valuable moving this forward, I'll turn to him if he has anything to add, and certainly then the council can certainly ask any questions. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like the community to look at this as probably one of the most important topics for us to discuss and move forward. This is the entrance experience. This is kind of a phrase that started circulating in our heads when we started sitting down and discussing this. This is how we will hopefully have an opportunity with all the entities involved to design the future entrance experience to our island. And this has a multitude of different aspects to it. And I think the key here is to look at this holistically, right? We cannot look at Upper Beachwalker, we cannot look separate, what we are going to do about pass issuing and the traffic backup that it creates. We cannot look at the safety issues or safety problems we have at the intersection between Kiowa Island Parkway and Beachwalker Drive, which I think last week was just proven to us or shown to us again with an incident between a vehicle and a bike. And so we need to look at this together. How are we going to resolve these issues? And these issues start, and I believe at least two of the community comments at the beginning of this meeting made this very clear. They are driven by growth, they are driven by traffic, but they're also driven by the fact that we are not yet have this holistic solution. And this holistic solution need to look at all of these different aspects of traffic mitigation, pass issuing to avoid the backup. It has to do with land that we need at that particular intersection to actually create a way of guiding traffic both onto the island as well as off the island. It requires us to also look at the upper Beachwalker parcels because we need to reroute, for example, the pedestrian and the bike path to areas where it is more safe for them to cross over Beachwalker Drive and continue their way to Freshfields or the other way around. So that was really the starting point, as the mayor mentioned, for us to sit down predominantly with Kiowa Island partners to discuss what options we really have in that respect. And that includes clearly this entire intersection, that includes at least major portions of the upper Beachwalker Drive parcels, and not only as it relates to the bike path, but also as it relates to certain compromises in the best interest of the community we want to find, as the mayor said, related to building setbacks, foliage coverage, residential density, building heights, and permitted uses of the land. This all is part of it. It also reaches over to the other side of this intersection as it relates to the current Kiowa Island Real Estate Office, both from a land purpose, or what we would need as certain portions of the parcel for a better improvement of this entire intersection and this multitude of different traffic that approaches the first gate or makes a right turn into Beachwalker Drive. All of this needs to be looked at, and that was the discussion. As the mayor said, there's no deal, there's no agreement yet, but we are heading in a direction that would help us to resolve these multitudes of issues, all together and drive to a solution that would help us to bring traffic backups down by using, for example, as it was suggested earlier by the community comments, use the current Kiowa Island Real Estate Office for pass issuing, so to bring that traffic away, to find solution to actually issue passes ahead of time, electronically. That could include ideas of self-serving counters when you're driving by and basically get your pass, at least for regular vehicles. Would that be a possibility? So all of this together is part of the discussions that we are having. And all of this needs to be looked at together, and it might lead into different directions of us having more land available for the road planning. It might give us the opportunity to acquire the current building of Kiowa Island Real Estate to facilitate a multitude of different community needs, even beyond the issuing of passes. And it will help us to find a compromise, hopefully find a compromise, how certain portions of the upper Beachwalker parcels will be developed as it relates, as mentioned, to building setbacks, residential density, building heights, and so on. I believe this is a very fortunate progress that we are making here. I would encourage the community to support us in this venture, and I promise that the town council will be very transparent. That's why we have this meeting here today, That's why we are talking about this openly. That's why we decided that all of this is on the table and not in executive session, as it might have been the practice in the past. We want to communicate open about this and facilitate the input of the community. And we believe that all of this together, maybe, using Endel West as an example, how things can actually really move forward in a positive sense, that we can create something here that would help us to build an entrance experience for everybody that comes to this island and exits the island in a way that is pleasant and will be remembered for generations to come.
Michael, I love your vision. I think it's a fabulous idea. I have not been involved in any of the meetings that you've had, so this is a little bit new to me. But I love your vision, and I do believe that relocating the pass office to that, well, I'll call it the real estate office for now, will alleviate the traffic, or a significant amount of traffic, because then you will have 2 lanes of traffic going in, not 1. That by itself will make a tremendous impact.
And everybody can go through if the pass is.
Yeah, that by itself will solve a lot, perhaps not all, but certainly a lot of the input traffic. I like the vision of a community entrance that's going to be visionary as well as dramatic. I think that'll be an awesome idea. I know there's a lot of details that have to be ironed out. Love to be involved, but I know with hard work they can be ironed out. So, Michael, thank you. I think it's a great idea.
We're just at a point that our small group needs to get larger. We need to talk with Jerry to get representation from the community association, and all of the groups that we mentioned. The group needs to get larger, and even though, well, we had to have enough of meetings just to make sure we could flesh out what the potential could be. But now we're public. As you said, once upon a time, we probably wouldn't have had this public. We're public now, and we want to keep it that way. So we have to get more people involved to begin to help us with this whole endeavor. The potential is just, the potential is amazing in terms of the willingness of Kiowa partners and Jordan and Mark specifically to be able to be working with us to do this is really very well received. And I do understand that their project, it is continuing, but so there's time pressures associated with this. We would like to put more meat to this bone and in a fairly short period of time. What?
So I feel I'm going to be a bit of the wet blanket with regard to this. Everybody else appears to be on board with it. I'm certainly fully supportive of exploring all options for solving the entrance to the island, the gate pass, the intersection, for upper and lower beach walker development. If there is an opportunity to holistically solve all those in a linked fashion, fine. I'm not at all persuaded at this juncture that linkage is necessary, number one, or necessarily appropriate, number two. But the thing that I'm perhaps most concerned about at this juncture is, Mr. Mayor, as you just said, there's some time pressures here, and using kind of the words, this project, this initiative will keep folks updated on progress. I'm appreciative of the fact that very appreciative of the fact that we are doing this openly, and you said this is the start of the process and we need to broaden this. At the outset, early on, we started with a presentation by Chris Carrata and regarding Andel West. I gave my full-throated endorsement for that, but noting that I had originally been very opposed to that because the key stakeholders were not involved in that process at the outset. And the key stakeholder, a couple of key stakeholders, one key stakeholder that got us to where we are now to something that everybody thinks is better is the Cacique HOA, because they were the ones that were most directly impacted. If you're talking about anything to do with the KIRE building particularly, or that intersection or Upper Beachwalker. The stakeholders who are going to be most interested are those at Riverview and Inlet Cove. And they have not been part of this process at all thus far. Conversations are being had without their involvement. And I think I would encourage that change pretty quickly. Substantively, I am.
Brad, can I comment on just this one point before you maybe come to your other points? That was exactly the intention, okay? The reason why we have that on the agenda and why we are talking about this openly, why we are taking this to a different platform is to now start involving the community and those directly or indirectly affected, right? And those are, of course, equally also the resort, right? Because they have an interest in the pass issuing topic. Of course, it's KICA because it's in their responsibility. And of course, it will and must include Kiowa River, Little Rabbit, I think it's called, the other community,
Point,
and in that cove, because the point, because they are going to be directly impacted, hopefully in a positive way. But of course, we need their input because they are also the people that are, for example, making this right turn all the time, right? And we need to have them involved. That's why this topic is on the agenda, because this is the start of that process, because we said we don't want to repeat the mistake that maybe was done in the very beginning of Anvil West, coming to the community and saying, this is it, okay? So here we are at a very early stage where we want, in an expedite fashion for various reasons, bring this to the community so that we can facilitate that process, hopefully in a good way, to help us find the right solution that hopefully at least the majority can agree upon.
And Brad, I thought I mentioned, I thought I mentioned members of the community. That was my intent. The community association, whatever I listed, but members of the community, that's exactly right. But we didn't want to go to anybody until we had this, so.
And I guess that's part of my concern until we had this, and I'm not sure what this is.
This discussion,
fair enough. But Michael, and believe me, I appreciate everything you said. What gives me pause is when it's been now mentioned three times, potentially using the KIRE building as a pass office, and there seems to be an underlying assumption that would necessarily improve traffic flow at the circle. I'm not a traffic engineer, I don't know, but my instinct, my gut, my initial reaction is that it would not. And in fact,
I think you sort of misunderstood a little bit, because I think the intention is not necessarily use the KIRE building as a pass office. It's to take advantage of the fact that we would have ownership of this extra bit of real estate, that then we could decide how can we best create a pass environment.
So I think that's worth exploring. I do. I really do believe that. I think that's worth exploring. But it's been mentioned multiple times to use the KIRE building.
Because everybody knows that, as opposed to saying the property where a KIRE building is just that property.
What I would encourage as an action item is to, if we need to bring back Kimley Horn, somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, to say, if somebody had access to the KIRE.
And we've done that. And we've done that so that they can start saying, if we had this additional property, what are some options?
When you say we've done that?
We did it last year. We had an appraisal of the building, and we had Kimley Horn look at it, and there were some significant possible improvements if we owned that building and owned that site.
I didn't. Was that part of their report to us?
So Kimberly Horn also looked, when we were looking at the right turn lane.
Yes. Yeah, just the right turn lane.
Yeah, we were
An
just looking
extra
at the right turn lane. Part of the discussion that occurred, Mr., correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the discussion that occurred was really to try to improve that intersection. This is when we started the whole process of looking at the intersection, was the pass office and the discussion that Kimberly Horn had, and I believe they also had this with maybe, I don't know if you had this with Kika at some point, but I think with us, am I getting my timetable wrong? That when we had that discussion, I thought we had talked about the pass office really, that how much, in regards to the level of service, how much that right turn lane and that improvement being that if the. That we talked about. If you can. Yeah, because I know that some of this, Brad, I'm just saying, was what the mayor said is correct, but we also had some earlier discussions, and I'll let Dylan
But
explain
what I
it.
recall, Stephanie, I'm happy to have it, from the report is there was analysis of adding the right turn lane, not, and whether there would be some additional encroachment, you figured out there's utility costs that may not warrant some costs that may not warrant the right turn lane. What I'm saying is, does acquisition of that property, is there any, I don't believe you guys undertook an assessment like, for example, that for big traffic circle or mass turbo traffic circle, and therefore that would solve all the problems regardless of whether the main gate stayed there and the pass office stayed there, or if the pass office were moved off island or somewhere else. So those are the kinds of questions.
Brad, you're correct in that. So we did. Who's speaking? Okay, yep, so, thank you. So I'm Dylan Turner, I'm with Kimberly Horn. I've done several traffic studies on behalf of the town of Kiowa Island, did their comprehensive traffic study, which is the report that Brad is referencing back to. So we looked at, our study just looked at, okay, we went through many options. At that time, you were sitting over here, it's good to see you on this side. But we looked at, hey, we want to do a potential of a roundabout at the current intersection of Beachwalker and Kiowa Island Parkway. We want to look at a traffic signal at the current intersection. Our issue that we ran into was the backups from the gate. So without the gate being relocated, we were limited on our options. And the KIRE building at that point was not known that it was a potential take or anything or buy or whatever. So we were left with the existing location of Beachwalker. And that's the plan that we came up with that has the free-flowing outbound. Inbound, we looked at it with and without a right turn lane. The right turn lane, we discussed, this was probably 2020 or 2021. Dates are all running together, but 2020-21 with the right turn lane at Beachwalker and Kiowa Island Parkway was it would help reduce the queue by about 7 cars. And we were also limited on our storage capacity that we could do from Beachwalker back because of the driveways to the KRE building. So we were reducing the queue by about 7 cars, and the overall intersection delay from maybe around 10 seconds total. And so at that time, we said it's kind of up to the town to either pursue or not pursue the right turn lane at Kiowa Island and Beachwalker. And then Brian and I were working together, and we got our survey back. There's significant utilities, shallow utilities underground, that if we were to go excavate, we're hitting those utilities and they'd have to be completely redone, which was going to double the project cost of what we had out there. And so then it's brought back up to remove the right turn lane. As far as anything that goes with the pass office, we did a supplemental analysis for the town, kind of an unofficial supplemental analysis that looked at if we moved the
pass distribution.
Yep, if we moved the pass distribution away from the gate.
Where?
Assuming the current location of the KRE building. So just assuming that the either on it and so using the driveway that's there today. So just using that assumption, not knowing where, but just on that property would be a pass office that we were able to see pretty significant improvements at the actual intersection of Beach Walker.
You would have to. You would
Yeah.
have to.
So again, and this is the thing, I'm not aware, I haven't seen.
I don't know how many people have
I
seen that.
would love to see that, but that, you never contemplated a traffic circle.
No.
Okay.
No.
And so here's my concern, and you can help me think through this,
Yep.
because this would be the major issues. I don't see how diverting traffic, past traffic into KIRE solves any problem. And in fact, I suspect it may exacerbate for certain constituencies, because you'd be having a backup on what is now the right lane and right turn lane getting into the pass office. Then they'd have to come back.
Yeah, we have them actually.
Brad, that's just not correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So-
that's-
Time out. I'm tired. The purpose of the meeting was not,
To solve it.
not to solve the problem. We are not solving the problem. The purpose of this meeting, this discussion, was just to tell you what we would like to do. We can have sessions about this ad nauseum, but we just needed to get started. And this is what we always get ourselves into. We immediately need to solve the problem, and everybody has their opinion, and it's not the right opinion, and blah, 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 and it stops. All we're asking, all we're telling, we would like to get started with this. We'll have a committee. We'll have a lot of people. We'll get consultants. We'll get studies. And we'll talk about the damn thing. It's an important subject. And last year, everything stopped. We went a little bit. It stopped. Everything went a little. There was too much discussion last year about the legal ability to be able to have discussions, we didn't even think, like I said, it all changed you guys are all elected now, and the change with the composition and the willingness to at least look at it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not asking for everybody's approval. There's nothing to approve, but we're going to look at it, because if we don't, I don't know what we'll get done. I don't even know if we can buy the building. We've not given them a price. There's no price. Jordan hasn't agreed to make the change to a site plan. Nothing's changed, but there's a willingness to talk. That's all. I mean, that's it. And we got, so we'll have sessions, we'll figure out. Right now, there's just been the four of us, and it's March the 5th. So this has all been done in 6 weeks. And a willingness of the four of us to bring this forward. That's as far as we got. So bring questions, think about it. We'll keep, think about reasons why not. I don't know. But if it doesn't, they're going to build the damn thing on Beach Walker. I don't know what they'll do with the real estate building. Maybe they'll keep it, sell it. That's their business. It's their project. And we're stuck with trying to figure out what we're going to do with that intersection. And then 5 years, 10 years from now, they'll say, well, what the hell? That thing's so disjointed, it doesn't make sense. Well, this is why it's disjointed, because they never looked at it in its entirety. That's all. That is the extent of this discussion this afternoon. We're out there now.
Right. And Brad, what you're saying, as you actually said, none of us is a traffic engineer, right? I think Russ is probably the one that comes the closest, right? But we need to leave this to the experts. We need to ask the right questions, right? And we need to ask the right questions in the right forums, right? With the community involved. And as I said in the beginning, I am certain we will not find a solution that 100% can agree upon, okay? But I am still confident, because I'm an optimist by nature, that we will find something that really provides us with the benefits that we are looking for as it relates to traffic, safety, and all of the adjacent property owners, along Beach Walker Drive. And we are at a point where we are confident that we have a discussion platform with the owners of these surrounding properties. And we haven't even talked about some of the properties that are actually on the north side of the Kiowa Island Parkway that might need to, at least to some degree, flow into this to make it all work, right? Just because of the space limitations we have today, right? And we need to make these decisions, right? It cannot be Kimball Horn or whoever worked with this group to say, oh, damn, there are all of these utility lines so shallow under the right turn, so we are neglecting this. This is our decision as a council to say we are willing to spend that money because it really solves the problems long term. But the matter of the fact today is we want to have that discussion. We want to have the discussion with all the different members of the community that have something to say, that have, you know, a constructive way of providing input that we can really live by, and that can help us to ask the right questions to the experts that we need, and to find a compromise. And if that includes that we should purchase the Kiowa Island real estate, property and building, then that's something we have to discuss. And again, there we will have endless discussions, hopefully with a good outcome, what we are going to do with the building. It might be partially, you know, a pass issuing location. It might be, you know, an additional office space for Kika. I think somebody brought up the idea, why can't we not use this as a gym location, because then we have more space? I have no idea. Right? Or at the end, we are deciding to tear it down and do something very different to it.
The best
right?
idea.
We don't know this yet, right? But the starting point for all of these discussions is supposed to be now, after we have confidence that we have a communication platform that will help us to look at this holistically and find a solution. Now it's up to us and the community, the entire community, to work with us in finding a solution. Okay?
I think we can't mislead ourselves or the community at large in that these two projects coming here today were really important. Riverstone is not pulling their project from the county. They are not pulling their project from their county. He came, he wanted to hear what we had to say. He's going to continue the discussions. Hopefully he wanted to see what kind of support. I said my 2 cents. I think it should be, I'd like it to be annexed. We can expedite the approval process. But they are a big company. They're not going to do all of that just on a pass and a prayer, just because we kind of said that. They're going to want to see the fact that we're really willing to make those types of, we're willing to move this forward, that he would be willing to do that before they would pull it from the county. I don't know what that's going to entail. That's up to him and his partners and his owners, the extent to which what Riverstone is going to do. Similarly, we've said it now a number of times. If we can't demonstrate that we have the ability to collegially work together to move this thing forward, this project's Andale's going to just continue to go as it is. I'm sorry. Beachwalker is going to continue to go as it is. So let's not kid ourselves that, I mean, why would any of us in our former worlds have just worked with another entity and just saying, trust us? No. That isn't going to happen. We're going to have to demonstrate that we really can put together good working groups that are able to do that. And they have done that at Beachwalker. Jesus, I'm getting this. And they have done all of that at Andale, and we are all excited about Plan B, and Chris has been able to get us with the review. That's what I like to see as a corollary to what we're talking about now. But in, I don't know, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, somebody can really look down and say, wow, that really makes sense. We've had experts looking at all of these issues. There have been broad roundtable discussions. The different neighborhoods that surround that really are buying. I mean, that's where we want to be. But we got to get started. I don't know what else to say.
Mayor, I'm very encouraged by what you and Michael have just said. If it's a process that's going to unfold like has ultimately unfolded with Andale West, I mean, I think that's what the community wants, should expect. And that's fine. My concern was born primarily out of sense, rightly or wrongly, that there were already some, like, we need to start negotiating over the purchase of the KIRE building, or we already have ideas ourselves as to what constitutes an acceptable development of Upper Beach Walker, et cetera. If we're kind of starting with a blank slate, and it's a community engagement, then I would applaud that. I think these are important issues. Yeah, okay, these are important issues, and it does warrant, bringing all the parties together and trying to figure this out.
Okay, thank you all. Council member comments, don't you dare.
I had Petra and Stephanie put together a little a dog and pony show for me. Huh?
Oh, crap, I forgot about that.
Well, John Moffett, do you have any comments? Brad, do you have any comments?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Will you indulge me for literally just 2 minutes? I will try to do just that. I know it's like...
I bet against you, Brad.
You got it. Really fast. I'll take that.
But we can start the clock. So this pertains to Beach Walker.
Okay.
And in part because I know someone from Inlet Cove was here, and she's been here all day long. In fact, two folks from Inlet Cove are here as well. And so since they've invested a lot of time in this is just about care and feeding of Beach Walker Drive, and compared to, you can zip through all the pictures, any other road on Kiowa Island. And the question is, why is a town-owned road the worst maintained road on Kiowa Island? We maintain 2 miles of our roads very well. Kiowa Island Parkway, Beach Walker Drive, we do not. Then the only last thing I'll point, do you have the section from the... So...
But do...
Our contract that we have with Artiques in regards to landscape.
So here's what the conveyance document says. It was going to be up there. The town agrees to maintain the property, this is Beach Walker Drive, and all improvements thereon, including but not limited to signage, landscaping, grassing, asphalt, roadway subsurfaces, bridges, drain pipes, blah, 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 in a clean, safe, attractive condition, having at least the ambience, engineering standards, quality and quantity of landscaping which currently exist in compliance with the standards manual. I don't know what that is. And shall continuously present an upscale appearance and impression of high quality as befits a primary road on Kiowa Island. So we are demonstrably not living up to the obligations we had taken on. And so my only hope is that, I know we have we've talked about, it may not make sense, as we talked about in the retreat, to do a major landscaping now, given all these other issues we're talking about. But the basic why the town has failed and continues to fail to maintain this particular road in the same fashion as Kiowa Island Parkway and every other road on Kiowa Island is the issue.
And Brad, I fully agree with you, because after we had that discussion at the retreat, I really spent time not only driving up and down, but also walking up and down, and the pictures speak a language. My thought was, after the retreat discussion, where we kind of came to a point to say, well, we have to do something about it, but let's see what we are doing with the intersection. But I think that was maybe we didn't make a decision, but maybe the wrong guidance at the time, because I think there is the majority of the stretch of Beach Walker Drive that we need to fix. Maybe the last 500 feet or 500 yards, we should stop until our prior topic is more clear, right? But everything else, I think we should really, ask the Public Works Department, would be my recommendation, to come up with a concept how we live up to these standards. All the way from 500 yards from the intersection all the way to Beach Walker Park.
Just so that I understand, so we make sure we're bringing forth the correct thing for Ways and Means this month. was that I do recall as well that we had talked about doing some improvements to Beachwalker Drive, but not doing a substantial amount of work because of the intersection improvement. What is coming before you guys at the end of this month at Ways and Means is a proposal from our landscape architect, OSD, for Beachwalker. So that is, we did have that slated for the March Ways and Means meeting. In regards to, Brian might be gone. Oh, in regards to maintenance, of course, like with regards to the roads, that would not be, of course, an OSD discussion, but it could be part of their process. You can come up here anytime. To talk about, well, I know in regards to the landscape piece is what OSD is going to look at.
Well,
but
that's
specifically
okay.
what
Suffice to
Mr.
say, we're going to fix it, right? And you're going to bring a proposal in
Well,
the Ways and
no. The question is what Mr. Belt's talking about is not an OSD proposal, but we can put together something in relation to the road itself.
So,
and if I may, I've requested money in the upcoming budget to do road maintenance and repair specifically for Beachwalker Drive. So as long as that gets approved in the budget, we'll be able to do some pretty significant road maintenance.
And I'm glad to hear that going forward. Part of the issue I'm raising is kind of why it must have been a considered decision on the part of a prior council or something to approve monies to take care of Key Island Parkway, but not Beachwalker.
It's, two things. One, it's probably hard to determine why those decisions were made by a prior council. And number two, if we knew, what good does that do us? What we need to do is make the right decision now.
That's one thing, but also to make sure that there is a process in place where, like, whenever issues are identified, that, along here, it's like Key Island Parkway, they're dealt with.
But
You're all here now. You're all here now, and we can do any and all. Make the decision when you bring it forward. Brian, we want it to be nice. So
right. And again, I want to re-emphasize, Brian, I don't know if that's possible for later this month, but to really fix the issue up to, let's say, 500 yards towards the intersection, but everything beyond and to the Beachwalker Park, we can fix now.
Well, to a certain extent, you got to keep in mind that there's still a boatload of construction traffic going down there to go into the Cape that's going to run right off the road into the grass plant. You got to be careful what you ask for. You'll end up spending the money twice.
Yeah, those heavy trucks will just ruin whatever road we have.
I hope my Inland Cove and Riverview colleagues will not be upset with me saying this. Where my council hat, I agree that we should not spend a lot of money right now on doing a major landscape redo of Beachwalker, given Lot 1, Upper Beachwalker, potentially the intersection. But there's a lot of ongoing. We identified, and by the way, Brian and the team have taken care of a couple things in the last few days, so appreciate that. But just that on a regular, ongoing basis, the same kind of decision-making that occurs with regard to rectifying anything on Key Island Parkway should be occurring on Beachwalker Drive. We only have 3 miles of road. This is 1/3 of it.
I have a question. If you wait until all that is done, Kate, number one, you're talking 5 years, 6 years? We're gonna have to live with Beachwalker looking like that for 6 years?
Well, I think that yeah.
I'm Darlene Bazala, I'm with Inland Cove.
HOA. And we've been dealing with Stephanie and Brian for 2 years plus. Same, fill in the voids that you have created with the pathway. And really nothing happened. And Brian mentioned last year that there was a beautification going to happen and be presented to the council, and nothing ever happened. So why is this? I guess I don't understand.
Well, and I'm not sure if a half-baked cake is what makes sense. One thing we had talked about is whether the whole right side, as you're going to Beachwalker Park, could at least be
Right,
addressed.
it doesn't have to be left, it could be to the right.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
again, this is
but
coming to
anyway,
Ways and Means and this month for you guys' discussion and decision.
Okay.
Okay.
But you can be assured, it's on the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor, for the extra, and members for the extra
I don't know.
intelligence.
Michael, anything to add?
Well, yeah, it was only 2 minutes, so it wasn't a big deal.
Anything to add?
No.
Russell, anything to add?
No, sir.
Citizen comments? Any? Oh, yes, sir.
David Stefano, 31 Burroughs Hall. A couple of small things and one relating to what you were just discussing. The Mingo Point curve with the stones. Back in
Mingo, say
August.
again?
Mingo Point curve, the stones.
Oh, yes, excuse me.
Back in August, Warren Stannard, former member of the Public Works Committee, sent an email to the entire council, the mayor, Brian, et cetera, about that rut in the road. Nothing happened. That was in August. In late November, I sent Brian an email. I said, this thing's getting dangerous. It's very deep. It's getting eroded. You got an email back in August. He said he never got that email. He said, I forwarded to him, et cetera. And then a few weeks ago, some stones get put in there. That has been a problem now since last July, if not June. And that temporary, I'm assuming that's a temporary fix right now. It's just a matter of time before somebody gets their windshield cracked. So we got to get that fixed yesterday. The new, at Sora Rail, the new trash compactor system. It's great. I used it. I'm there the other day when it was raining, and it's all dirt in front of that when you park your car. It's all mud. And when I was there the other day, taped on the thing are some directions on it, and an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper put up there with Scotch tape. I know the equipment came in late, but all of that stuff could have been done in advance. And my point is, a lot of things don't get done, okay? I used to be chairman of the Public Works Committee. It got eliminated 1.5 years or 2 years ago. Why, I don't know. But I'll tell you, what we were talking about amongst the members was Beach Walker. It needs something. We only got 2 roads. We fixed the big road, okay? And one of the things the Public Works Committee did, we came up with the idea of putting GeoGrid in to stop all the ruts. I have no idea why that was not put in at Mingo Point Curve. Maybe there was a technical difficulty, I don't know. But that's the only place there's ruts now. There used to be ruts all over the place, okay? So I'm just saying that, you know, this, I'll tell you right now, if the Public Works Committee wasn't disbanded, Beach Walker Park would be done right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.